father tried to kill him through the only person he loved. Sand said no and painted the room red. Now this insomniac menace, with love carved in his skull, has zero mercy. Crushed the Nomu, deleted all for one, and turned Shigaraki into red mist. Izuku Midoriya is what happens when the weapon wakes up pissed off and chooses violence forever.
Welcome, legends, to Chronos Recom. I wrote this story myself, so if you have any suggestions or what-ifs you want to see, drop it in the comments below. Also, just wanted to let you know I've got a Patreon set up now for anyone who wants to support the channel directly. You can get early access to stories, submit direct fan requests, and get exclusive content. It's totally optional, but if you want to help keep these stories coming, check it out. Links in the description. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Let's dive into this story.
Listen, you need to understand something before we begin. The story of Izuku Midoriya is the kind of story that makes you check the clock and realize 4 hours have passed and you've been holding your breath for 3 of them. This kid, this hollow-eyed, sand-carrying, insomniac child, walked through the gates of the most prestigious hero academy in Japan, looking like something dragged out of a desert that doesn't exist on any map. And everything that happened after that, every fight, every crushing display of power, every moment where the crowd went from noise to absolute zero, all of it leads back to one night. One betrayal. One decision made in blood and sand by a 6-year-old boy who realized the entire world was already his enemy. So let's start where monsters get born. Izuku Midoriya is 6 years old on the night his father tries to kill him. He lives in a compound on the outskirts of Musutafu, a sprawling estate that belongs to Hisashi Midoriya, a man whose public face is warm handshakes and fundraiser dinners and campaign smiles so practiced they could fool a polygraph. Behind the gates of that estate, in the reinforced wing where the sensors never stop recording, Izuku sits cross-legged on the floor of a room with no windows and walls reinforced with carbon fiber sheeting. The gourd on his back, already too large for his small frame, already worn smooth at the strap from the hours he spends holding it, breathes. It inhales and exhales in a rhythm that matches the boy's lungs. The sand inside it shifts and rolls like something dreaming. He hasn't slept tonight. He hasn't slept any night. The voices in the sand won't let him. The low, wet rumble that lives behind his eyes, the one that whispers, "Mother," in a voice that sounds like grinding stone. If Izuku closes his eyes long enough, the rumble becomes a roar, and the roar becomes something with teeth, and the thing with teeth tries to eat him from the inside out. So he stays awake. He has stayed awake for 6 years, napping in fractured bursts of 20 minutes and jolting conscious with his heart slamming against his ribs every single time. And the rings under his eyes are so deep and so permanent that the estate staff stopped asking about them before he turned 4. But tonight is different because tonight the hallway outside his door creaks with a footstep that belongs to a person Izuku trusts, the only person Izuku trusts. Her name is Chiyo Narazaki. She is 34. She has been Izuku's caretaker since the day Inko Midoriya bled out on the delivery table, and Hisashi looked at the screaming infant in the doctor's arms like a man examining a malfunctioning appliance. Chiyo is the one who feeds Izuku. She is the one who reads to him on the nights when the voices get so loud his jaw locks from clenching. She is the one who sits on the edge of his bed and talks him through the worst episodes. The ones where the sand starts moving on its own, where the walls crack and the floor splits and the beast's influence leaks out of the gourd like toxic gas. Chiyo looks at Izuku and sees a boy. Everyone else in this compound looks at him and sees a weapon or a corpse waiting to happen. So when the door opens at 3 in the morning and Chiyo steps inside, Izuku's guard is down in the only way it ever drops. His heartbeat stays level. The sand stays still. He looks up from the floor with those cracked turquoise eyes and says, in his tiny rusted voice, "Chiyo ni, you're up late." She's wearing her usual cardigan. Her hair is down instead of pinned back, which is unusual in hours, but Izuku doesn't process the detail. What he also doesn't process What his 6-year-old brain refuses to register because it would mean processing something too large and too terrible is the glint of metal at her hip, half hidden by the fold of the cardigan. A blade. Short. Military issue. The kind Hisashi's security detail carry in shoulder rigs. Chiyo's face is doing something wrong. Her smile is in the right place, but everything behind it is moving too fast, like water rushing behind a cracking dam. Her eyes are wet. Her hands are trembling so badly that the blade makes a faint sound against the fabric. Metal on cotton, barely audible, a whisper of what's coming. "Izuku," she says, "I need you to close your eyes for me." He trusts her. That is the entire tragedy compressed into 4 words. He trusts her the way a child trusts the one person who ever made the nightmare livable, and so he closes his eyes. He sits cross-legged on the floor of his reinforced room, with the gourd breathing against his spine, and he closes his eyes and waits. The blade comes down, and the sand moves faster. It erupts from the gourd like a living wall, a barrier of compressed grains that materializes between the blade's edge and the bridge of Izuku's nose with a speed that has nothing to do with the boy's reflexes. The sand acts on instinct older than Izuku's existence, on a program written by something ancient and hungry and pathologically devoted to keeping its host alive. The blade hits the sand shield and shatters. The fragments scatter across the floor like dropped teeth. Chiyo gasps, a sound torn out of her chest, and recoils backward, but the sand is already answering the aggression. It wraps around her wrist. It climbs her arm. It covers her body in a shell of living earth so fast she doesn't finish her exhale before the pressure begins. Izuku's eyes snap open. He sees Chiyo suspended above the ground, wrapped throat to ankle in sand so dense it looks like armor. Her face, the only part of her still exposed. She is crying. She is crying so hard her body is shaking inside the shell, and the words coming out of her mouth are fractured and wet and falling apart. "I'm sorry. Izuku, I'm sorry. He made me. Your father, he said he would. Izuku, please, I'm sorry. I didn't want to. I love you. I love you so much. Please." The sand tightens. The beast rumbles its approval somewhere in the basement of Izuku's skull. A sound like satisfaction, a sound like hunger finally answered. Izuku stares at Chiyo's face, at the tears, at the terror, at the love that is still there, still real, even now, even in this, and his hand rises. The execution posture, fingers curled, fist ready to clench. Sand. Burial needs a single command. One flex of the hand. One decision, Chiyo's mouth forms his name one more time. The sound doesn't reach him. The beast is too loud. The fist closes. The compression is instantaneous and total. The sound it makes is something between a thunderclap and a crumpling can, and it echoes off the reinforced walls of the room and travels down the hallway and rattles the sensors that Hisashi's security team monitors 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When the sand opens, when it peels back like a hand uncurling, what falls to the floor is a shape that used to be Chiyo Narazaki, and it is wearing her cardigan, and it is still holding the broken handle of the blade. And there is still a trace of that love on what remains of her face. Izuku drops to his knees. He crawls forward on hands and knees, the sand settling around him like snowfall, and he touches her face with fingers that are still small enough to belong to a kindergartner. The turquoise eyes are open wide. The pupils are huge. His breathing is shallow and rapid and arrhythmic and getting worse. Chione? The word is a whisper, the kind of whisper that lives in the throat of someone whose entire understanding of the world just inverted itself. Chione, wake up. Please wake up. Please. You're all I... Please. She doesn't wake up. The body on the floor stays exactly as it is, and the sand that killed her settles onto Izuku's skin like it's trying to comfort him, and the beast in his skull makes a sound like laughter, and the sensors in the hallway record everything. And somewhere in the main house, Hisashi Midoriya receives a notification on his phone and reads it with the same expression he uses for budget reports. Izuku's face goes through something in that moment. It travels a distance most people don't cover in a lifetime. The grief hits first. A wave so massive, it actually pushes the sand outward in a physical pulse, cracking the floor tiles in a ring around his body. And then the understanding hits. His father sent her. The person Izuku trusted beyond anyone in the world was sent here with a blade by the man whose blood runs in Izuku's veins. And she came because she had no choice. and the sand killed her because the sand kills everything that comes close. And this is the design. This is what Izuku was built for. This is what the weapon does. It destroys the things it loves, because that is the gap between the bullet and the person it's aimed at. The bullet doesn't choose, the bullet just impacts. The grief folds inward. It collapses into itself like a star with too much mass. And what's left when the collapse finishes isn't grief anymore. It's something colder, something quieter, no, something more still. Something that looks out of Izuku's eyes with an expression that has no bottom, no floor, no endpoint. An abyss with a child's face. He stands up. The sand rises with him, a slow spiral that pulls in every grain from the floor, from the walls, from the cracks in the ceiling. It circles him like a living tornado, and it grows and it accelerates, and the room's reinforced walls begin to bow inward from the pressure differential. Every surface within 50 feet begins to shed its top layer. Concrete dust, paint flakes, plaster, insulation fibers, all of it drawn into the orbit of a 6-year-old boy standing over the body of the only person who ever loved him. And then he screams. The sound comes from somewhere lower than his lungs. It carries the weight of the beast and the weight of the boy and the weight of 6 years of sleepless, loveless, weaponized existence. It hits the walls, and the walls answer with cracks that run floor to ceiling. It hits the reinforced door, and the door folds inward like tinfoil. The security team in the monitoring room watches their screens go white with static, and they're already running for the exits because they know, everyone in this compound knows, what happens when the weapon breaks containment. The scream echoes across the estate. It reaches Hisashi's study. The man puts down his phone and looks at the window, and for the first time in 6 years allows a flicker of something that might be fear to cross his face before smoothing it back into his usual expression of stone-faced cost-benefit analysis. In the room, Izuku stops screaming. The tornado of sand slows. His breathing evens. His face is a wasteland, nothing living behind the expression anymore, nothing that responds to external input, nothing that recognizes the difference between pain and peace, because both have become the same flat landscape. He speaks. His voice is 6 years old and ancient at the same time. I understand now. He looks at the body on the floor. Everyone leaves. Everyone turns. Everyone carries a blade somewhere. I can't see it. The sand knows. The sand always knows. The sand is the only thing that has never betrayed me. He touches his own chest, presses his small hand flat against his sternum. I love only myself. I fight only for myself. I exist to kill. The beast rumbles its agreement. The sand responds. It lifts from the ground, a tendril of it, alive and eager, and it presses against Izuku's forehead. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't close his eyes. He lets it carve. Grain by grain, layer by layer, with pressure that would split rock, the sand writes into his skin. The kanji takes shape in blood that wells up and mixes with the sand until the color is rust red and permanent. I. Love. Written by a child's quirk into a child's face as a declaration of the only loyalty that will never break. When the security team finally gathers the courage to approach the room, they find Izuku sitting cross-legged in the center of a circle of destruction. Chiyo's body against the far wall, the kanji fresh and bleeding on his forehead and his eyes looking at nothing at all. They radio Hisashi. They ask for instructions. The response comes back in 12 seconds. Contain and relocate. The project continues. The project continues. For 9 more years, let me tell you what those years do to a human being. Let me tell you what happens when a child grows up with a monster living in his skull and a father who treats him like an R&D line item, and a world that has already decided what he is before he ever gets a chance to show them otherwise. The answer is everything bad. Every possible thing that can go wrong inside a person goes wrong inside Izuku Midoriya between the ages of 6 and 15, and the result walks into the UA. Entrance exam looking like a war crime with a pulse. He's been moved through 3 different facilities in those 9 years. Each time, Hisashi determines the current containment is insufficient. Each time the sand reaches too far, or the beast's influence grows too strong, or a staff member gets too close and gets hurt, Izuku gets relocated. New walls, new sensors, new handlers who look at him with the same mixture of professional detachment and barely concealed terror. Nobody touches him. Nobody speaks to him longer than necessary. Nobody makes the mistake Chiyo made of treating the weapon like a boy, because the story of what happened to Chiyo circulates among the staff like a ghost story told around a campfire. She loved the weapon, and the weapon killed her. That's the lesson Hisashi makes sure everyone learns on their first day. So Izuku grows. He grows tall and lean and hollow, his body burning through calories it never quite replenishes, because the insomnia eats his metabolism alive. His face settles into its permanent state, turquoise eyes that look like cracked ice over a frozen lake, the rings beneath them so pronounced they look painted on. The kanji scar faded from wound red to a permanent raised mark that draws every eye in every room. His hair grows wild and uncombed, green-black curls that fall over the scar when he leans forward. His voice drops from a child's whisper to a teenager's rasp, still barely audible, still carrying the cadence of someone who spends most of his speaking hours in conversation with something only he can hear. Mother, do you hear them? He says it in hallways. He says it in the middle of assessments. He says it to the sand while handlers stand 3 meters away pretending they didn't hear anything. The beast has become mother in Izuku's private language, the only constant voice, the only permanent companion, the presence that has been with him since before birth. He speaks to it the way another teenager might speak to a best friend or a parent, with familiarity, with something that could almost be affection if you squint hard enough through the horror of it. Hisashi watches all of this on camera feeds from his office in the Capitol building. He watches the quirk assessments grow more destructive each year. He watches the sand respond faster, denser, with greater range and greater force. He watches his son level training grounds and crack bunker walls and bury armored vehicles in sand tombs that take industrial equipment 3 days to excavate. And he runs the numbers. The weapon is growing. The weapon is approaching a capability threshold that makes it viable for something. Hisashi hasn't decided what yet. Maybe military application, maybe a deterrent asset, maybe leverage for the kind of backroom negotiations that happen between people whose power operates well above the level of elections and public opinion. But first, the weapon needs legitimacy. It needs a public face. It needs to be placed somewhere visible and prestigious enough that Hisashi can point at it and say, "This is mine. I made this. This belongs to me and to the interests I represent." UA High School, the most prestigious hero academy in Japan. The proving ground where the nation's greatest heroes cut their teeth. Hisashi makes a phone call. He pulls strings. He doesn't ask Izuku's opinion because Izuku's opinion has never been a variable in any equation Hisashi has ever solved. The acceptance arrives as a directive. You will attend this exam. You will pass. You will enter UA as my representative. Izuku reads the directive on the tablet placed outside his containment room. His expression doesn't change. His turquoise eyes scan the text once, and then the sand picks up the tablet and crushes it to powder in midair, and he goes back to staring at the wall. But he goes. He goes because the alternative is another year in a featureless room talking to the voice in his skull, and even a weapon gets tired of the same walls. The morning of the UA entrance exam is February cold, the kind that turns breath to vapor and makes exposed skin sting. Izuku Midoriya walks through the gates of the testing campus, and every person in a 50-meter radius feels something change in the air. It's the sand. Even sealed in the gourd, even dormant, the sand puts out a pressure, a heaviness that sits on the chest like a hand pressing down. It smells like dry earth and copper, and something older than both. The kids gathered in the courtyard, bright-eyed, nervous, chattering about strategies and quirk matchups, stop talking one by one as Izuku passes through them. He is tall for 15. Lean in a way that says underfed rather than athletic. His clothes are nondescript, sand-colored layers that have clearly been slept in or sat in through nights without sleep for multiple days. The gourd on his back is enormous, easily half his height, thick as a barrel, its surface rough and pitted like sun-baked clay. The strap across his chest is worn white smooth from years of pressure. His arms hang at his sides. His eyes twitch at the outer corners, the telltale flutter of a nervous system that hasn't experienced true rest in a decade. He mutters as he walks, lips moving. Inaudible to anyone more than a foot away, but visible, a constant stream of half-words directed inward. Mother, loud today. Too many people. Too many heartbeats. Mother, I hear them. A girl with brown hair and a round face, Ochako Uraraka, though Izuku will never ask her name, almost walks into him at the courtyard entrance. She opens her mouth to apologize, looks up at his face, and the words die. The scar. The eyes. The rings. The way the air around him feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. She steps backward, her mouth closes. She says nothing. Izuku passes her without any indication he noticed she existed. Inside the auditorium, Present Mike delivers the briefing with his usual volume and energy. The rules are standard: destroy robots, earn points, 10 minutes on the clock. The students absorb the information with varying degrees of intensity. Izuku sits in the back row of the auditorium. The seat on either side of him is empty. The seats in the row in front of him are empty. There is a zone of vacancy around him like a physical barrier, and every student who considered sitting nearby changed their mind at the last second and chose somewhere else. A tall boy with blue hair and engine legs, Tenya Ida, raises his hand and asks a question about the zero-pointer. Present Mick deflects with showmanship. Ida sits back down. Throughout this exchange, Izuku's lips never stop moving. The muttering continues. A girl 3 rows ahead glances back at him, meets his eyes, and turns around so fast she nearly pulls a muscle. Then they're outside. The testing zones are massive, simulated urban environments, multi-block cityscapes designed to accommodate hundreds of examinees simultaneously. Izuku is assigned to Zone B. He stands at the starting line with 30 other hopefuls, each one buzzing with adrenaline and pre-fight energy. Present Mike's voice rings across the loudspeakers. And start! There's no countdown in a real emergency. Every examinee in Zone B charges forward, legs pumping, quirks activating, voices raised in war cries and competitive shouts. 30 teenagers sprint into the artificial cityscape with everything they have. Izuku stands at the starting line. He stands with his arms crossed over his chest and his eyes half-lidded, and his body completely, absolutely, immovably still. The sand in the gorge shifts. It rumbles. It makes a sound like something waking from a very long sleep and finding itself hungry. Izuku tilts his head. His turquoise eyes track the robots appearing at the far end of the avenue. Dozens of them, mechanical bodies the size of cars, rolling forward on treads and legs and thruster-assisted limbs, points on wheels. The other examinees engage them with fists and kicks and quirk activations, each one focused on their individual targets, their individual scores. Izuku uncrosses his arms. He reaches behind him and touches the gourd with one hand. The cork stopper dissolves. The sand begins to pour. It doesn't rush. It flows, a slow, vast, inevitable tide that spreads from the gourd across the pavement in every direction simultaneously. It moves like a living carpet, expanding outward from Izuku's feet with the patience of a rising ocean. It fills the cracks in the asphalt. It climbs the curbs. It rolls up the sides of buildings in thin, seeking tendrils. It covers the ground beneath the advancing robots without any of them registering the change. Then it climbs. Dozens of three-pointer robots, the most valuable targets in the zone, each one the size of a delivery truck. Feel the sand wrap around their treads, their legs, their joints. It moves into every gap and seam. It fills their mechanical bodies from the outside in, packing itself into spaces between gears, between plates, between the structures that allow movement. The robots slow. They stutter. They stop. Izuku speaks. His voice barely carries past his own lips, but the sand hears it perfectly. Sand coffin. Every grain tightens simultaneously. 37 robots, the entire advancing line. A wall of machines that would have taken the other examinees the full 10 minutes to clear are encased in shells of living sand that contract and hold and compress with force that makes the metal shriek. The examinees closest to the frozen robots stumble to a halt. They turn, they stare. They watch the sand crawl up the machines' bodies and seal them in tombs of earth, and they try to process what their eyes are showing them, and their brains simply refuse. Izuku closes his fist. Sand burial. The sound fills the entire zone. It is the sound of 37 machines being crushed simultaneously. Metal folding, gears shattering, frames collapsing inward under pressure that comes from everywhere at once. The noise rolls across the artificial city like thunder. Wreckage rains down inside the sand shells. The shapes that were robots become formless, compressed blocks of scrap metal encased in sand, and the sand holds them suspended above the ground like trophies for a full 3 seconds before releasing them. They hit the pavement in a cascade of heavy impacts. On the examiner display boards, a name jumps in point value so rapidly the digital counter flickers. Midoriya Izuku, 111 points. In one move. In 6 seconds. Without taking a single step from the starting line. Uraraka, assigned to a different zone but visible on the monitoring screens, isn't present to see it live. But Tenya Ida is in Zone B. He stands 60 meters from the starting line with one hand raised and one villain bot sparking at his feet and his mouth hanging open behind his helmet visor. His engine's idle. His brain tries to reconcile the input. A boy who did nothing, who stood still, just scored higher in 6 seconds than most examinees will score in the full 10 minutes. What? Ida whispers. Is that Quirk? He isn't the only one asking. Across the zone, examinees have stopped fighting. They've stopped moving. They stand among the wreckage of their individual battles and stare at the starting line where Izuku Midoriya still has his arms crossed, his eyes still half-lidded, his posture still radiating the complete and total disinterest of someone who just solved a math test while the rest of the class was still reading the first question. But the exam isn't over. More robots come. Waves of them. 2-pointers, 3-pointers, streaming from side streets and cross alleys. The sand handles them without Izuku's conscious attention. It flows through the streets ahead of the machines, rises from below them, encases and buries them in sequential waves, while the boy at the starting line appears to be having a conversation with himself. His lips move. His eyes track something the cameras can't see. Mother, they're loud. Too loud. Metal voices. The point counter climbs. 150, 190, 230. The examiners watching the live feed start exchanging looks. Someone reaches for a phone. Someone else is already halfway out of their chair. In the monitoring room, Principal Nezu sits with his paws folded on the desk and his eyes fixed on one screen among dozens. His small face carries an expression that most of his colleagues have never seen on him. The expression of someone encountering genuine surprise. Nezu knows every quirk on record. He has data on every student who applied this year, their quirk assessments, their academic profiles, their physical fitness scores. The file on Midoriya Izuku was sparse and heavily classified, with Hisashi Midoriya's name on the seal. Nezu expected something interesting. He did not expect this. "Recovery girl," he says softly. "Come look at this." The elderly healer shuffles over to the screen. She adjusts her glasses. She watches the sand pour through Zone B like an ancient flood. She watches robots disappear into the earth. She watches the point counter hit 250 and keep climbing. "That child hasn't moved," she says. "He has not taken a single step," Nezu confirms. "His heart rate has remained at resting levels since the exam began." Recovery girl looks at the boy on the screen, at the rings under his eyes, at the posture, at the gourd on his back. Her healer's instincts fire on every cylinder. "When was the last time that child slept?" she asks. Nezu doesn't answer. He's watching the screen with his head tilted, his black eyes gleaming with something between fascination and concern. Then the ground shakes. The 0-pointer emerges from behind the tallest buildings in Zone B. It is enormous. A mechanical titan the size of a skyscraper segment, its shadow swallowing entire city blocks. Its footsteps crack the asphalt. Its presence is designed to simulate overwhelming, unstoppable threat, the kind that can only be run from. That is the point. The 0-pointer is worth 0 points because students are meant to flee from it. It teaches them that discretion is a hero skill. Every examinee in Zone B runs. Legs carry bodies away from the advancing colossus. Quirks activate in service of escape rather than combat. The rational part of every human brain in that zone delivers the same message. You cannot fight this. You must leave. The point counter on the display board becomes irrelevant. Survival instinct overrides competition instinct. Except for one. Izuku Midoriya does not move. He stands at the starting line with his arms crossed as the 0-pointer advances toward him, its shadow falling over his body like closing hand. The ground shakes with every step it takes. Debris falls from damaged buildings. Other examinees sprint past him. One of them shouts at him to move. grabs at his shoulder, recoils when the sand forms a spine ridge along Izuku's back. He watches the machine approach. His head tilts slightly. His turquoise eyes track its movement with the lazy interest of someone watching rain through a window. Then he drops into a crouch. He touches the pavement with 2 fingers. The sand in the gourd explodes outward, every grain, every particle, all at once, emptying the container completely. But it doesn't stop there. The sand hits the asphalt and reaches deeper. It communicates with the earth below the artificial cityscape, with the soil, the clay, the mineral substrate beneath the concrete. And the earth answers. The ground beneath the zero-pointer's feet changes state. Solid becomes liquid. Concrete, rebar, compressed earth, all of it transitions to sand in a wave of transformation that spreads from Izuku's fingertips outward in a circle that expands faster than the machine can process. The zero-pointer's left foot punches through what was solid ground a millisecond before and finds nothing below it. It lurches, its massive body tilts, its center of gravity shifts past the point of recovery, and then the wave rises. Sand, tons of it, hundreds of tons of it, pulled from the earth itself, lifts from the ground in a wall that climbs past the zero-pointer's knees, past its waist, past its chest. It is the height of the machine itself, a tsunami of transformed earth that curls at the crest like an ocean wave and holds for a single, impossible second at its apex. Every examinee who is running stops. They turn. They look up at a sand wave taller than the buildings around it, and their bodies simply stop responding to commands. Izuku clenches his raised fist. The wave breaks. It crashes over the zero-pointer with a force that produces a sound like continuous thunder. A roaring, grinding, overwhelming wall of noise that lasts 3 full seconds. The machine disappears beneath it, completely, totally, engulfed in a tide of sand that buries it and keeps burying it, packing in tighter and tighter and tighter as it pushes the massive body downward through the liquefied ground into the earth below. The sand fills in above it. The surface smooths. Where the zero-pointer stood, where a mechanical titan the size of a skyscraper segment was advancing 3 seconds ago, there is a sand dune, flat-topped, still, indistinguishable from the floor of a desert. Just sitting there in the middle of an artificial cityscape like someone dropped a piece of the Sahara into downtown Tokyo, there is a long moment where nothing happens. The sand settles, dust motes hang in the air. Izuku straightens from his crouch. He rolls his shoulders. The gourd on his back refills itself, sand streaming back into the container from the surrounding area, repacking, resettling. He turns his back to the dune. He mutters something inaudible. He walks toward the exit. Behind him, the remaining examinees in Zone B stand frozen in various poses of mid-flight. Their faces all wear the same expression. The expression of people who have just witnessed something fundamentally incompatible with their understanding of what a high school entrance exam looks like. In the monitoring room, the silence is total. Every examiner has stopped working. Every screen still cycles through zones, through psych. But every pair of eyes in the room is fixed on Zone B, where a teenager with a gourd on his back is walking away from a sand dune that used to be an unstoppable machine. Recovery girl removes her glasses. She cleans them on her coat. She puts them back on. The image hasn't changed. Principal Nezu, she says. Yes, recovery girl? What exactly did the file on this child say? Nezu's paws unfold. He reaches for his tea with complete composure, lifts the cup, takes a small sip. His eyes stay on the screen. The file, he says, was classified above my clearance level. I had to call in 3 favors to access a summary. He takes another sip. The summary said, and I quote, sand manipulation quirk, parasitic mutation, extreme insomnia as a secondary condition. Father Hisashi Midoriya, Diet Member, District 7. That is all it contained. That is all. That is all. Though I suspect... Nezu sets his cup down and watches Izuku's small figure disappear through the zone exit on screen, that what we just witnessed renders the file's contents somewhat inadequate as a description. The final point total for Midoriya, Izuku reads 347. It is the highest score in the history of the UA entrance exam practical test, surpassing the previous record held by Endeavor, set 22 years ago, by over 100 points. The score is so high that the display board software flags it as a potential error and requires manual confirmation. The acceptance letter arrives at Hisashi's compound the next week. Izuku reads it without expression. The sand shifts in the gourd. The beast murmurs something that sounds like satisfaction. Izuku folds the letter once, slips it into his pocket, and resumes staring at the wall. UA, the proving ground. The place where heroes are made. Izuku Midoriya arrives for his first day carrying the same gourd, wearing the same sand-crusted layers, with the same rings under his eyes and the same kanji burned into his forehead, and the same constant murmur playing across his lips like a prayer that never finishes. He walks through the halls of the Hero Course building, and students part around him like water dividing at a rock. The whispers start immediately. They will never stop. Is that him? The entrance exam record? Look at his eyes. Has he ever slept? What's in the container? I heard he buried the 0-pointer alive. Don't get close. Just don't. Class 1A, the Hero Course. 20 students, each one selected through the most competitive process in Japanese education. They file into their homeroom, a sprawling space with tiered desks and a view of the training grounds, and they find their seats. And they size each other up, and every single one of them finds their gaze drawn to the back corner where Izuku Midoriya sits with his gourd leaning against the wall beside him and his head resting against one palm, and his turquoise eyes tracking something invisible across the ceiling. Shoto Todoroki, the son of Endeavor, the boy with fire and ice split down the center of his body, looks at Izuku once, holds the look for 3 full seconds, and then turns away with an expression that might be recognition. 2 children built by their fathers for purposes their fathers chose. The parallel doesn't need words. Katsuki Bakugo, explosive, furious, burning from the inside with a need to dominate that saturates every atom of his body, takes one look at the kid in the back corner and feels something rise in his chest that he doesn't have a name for yet. Something between rage and confusion. The kid radiates nothing. Less than nothing, an anti-presence. A hole in the room where a personality should be. Bakugo files it under irrelevant and moves on. He will regret that filing system later. Aizawa enters, the homeroom teacher. A man who looks as sleep-deprived as Izuku and carries the same hollow energy, though for different reasons. His eyes sweep the room, counting faces, assessing. When they reach the back corner, they pause for a fraction longer than anywhere else. Then they move on. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shota. Grab your gym clothes, we're doing a quirk assessment test. The assessment happens outdoors. Ball throws, sprints, grip tests, standing jumps, all the standard physical metrics performed with quirks active. Each student gets their turn. Each one performs at a level that would shatter civilian records. This is UA. This is the cream. Then it's Izuku's turn at the ball throw. He walks to the circle. The ball sits in his palm. He looks at it with zero engagement, a total absence of investment that makes the watching students uncomfortable in a way they struggle to articulate. Then the sand lifts from his gourd in a stream, wraps around the ball, and launches it. The sand creates a channeled rail gun effect, compressed grains accelerating in a tight spiral that converts rotational force into linear velocity, and the ball disappears into the sky so fast it leaves a vapor trail. Aizawa's sensor beeps. The number reads infinity. The ball never came down. The sand launched it at escape velocity. It left the atmosphere. Aizawa stares at his device. He blinks once. He taps it with his finger. The number doesn't change. It says infinity, Uraraka whispers from the cluster of watching students. Her eyes are dinner plates. That isn't possible, Ida says. But his voice carries zero conviction because the evidence is right there on the screen. Izuku walks away from the circle. He returns to his position at the edge of the group, separate, alone, the gourd on his back shifting as it settles. His lips move. The muttering continues. Mother. They stare too much. Too many eyes. The assessment continues. Izuku performs each test with the same complete disengagement, the sand doing the work while the boy occupies a mental space that has nothing to do with the physical tasks at hand. Every result is absurd. Every metric breaks. The gap between his numbers and the next highest student is a gulf that makes the other 19 members of Class 1A feel something they've never felt before. Irrelevance. But the story isn't about numbers on a board. The story is about what comes next. What happens when a weapon designed for isolation gets placed in the center of a building full of people? when the emptiest boy alive gets surrounded by teenagers who make noise and make contact and exist in the same airspace without fear. Weeks pass. Izuku attends classes. He sits in the back corner. He responds to direct questions from teachers in monosyllables that are technically correct and completely hollow. He eats alone, or rather sits at an empty table in the cafeteria with food in front of him that he rarely finishes, because the beast makes his appetite inconsistent and the insomnia destroys his relationship with hunger. Students try to approach him in the early days. They are friendly. They are curious. They want to know about the entrance exam, about the gourd, about the scar on his forehead. The sand forms small spines along Izuku's shoulders when they get close. An involuntary response, the shield detecting potential threats in the approach of unfamiliar bodies. The students back off. They stop trying. The empty space around Izuku becomes permanent, understood, accepted. One person doesn't accept it. Ochako Uraraka, the girl who nearly walked into him at the entrance exam, the girl with gravity manipulation and a smile like unfiltered sunshine, keeps trying. She sits at his table in the cafeteria. She greets him in the hallways. She asks him questions she knows he won't answer, and when the sand raises its spines, she leans back but doesn't leave. "Good morning, Midoriya. Did you sleep last night?" The sand settles. He doesn't answer. She doesn't stop. This will matter later, in ways neither of them understand yet. And then, the League of Villains attacks the USJ, and everything about Izuku Midoriya's time at UA accelerates into a different gear entirely. The USJ, Unforeseen Simulation Joint. A massive training facility divided into environmental zones: flood zone, collapse zone, fire zone, mountain zone, downpour zone. Class 1A arrives for a rescue training exercise with the Space Hero 13 as their instructor. The students are relaxed, prepared, engaged in the comfortable rhythm of institutional learning. The warp gate opens in the central plaza without warning. Villains pour through. Dozens of them. Then more dozens. Then what looks like hundreds, bodies filling the central space, spreading to every zone, each one radiating intent that has nothing to do with training and everything to do with genuine harm. At the center of the warp gate, two figures stand. Shigaraki Tomura, a man with hands covering his body and scratching at his neck with forefinger tension. Behind him, a creature, massive, its brain exposed, its body engineered for a single purpose. The Nomu, the anti-symbol of peace weapon. 13 moves to protect the students. Aizawa launches himself into the central plaza to buy time. The atmosphere shifts from educational to survival in 2 seconds flat, and every student in Class 1A feels the gear change in their stomach. But Izuku feels something else. The beast is rising. The voices, always present, always murmuring, always hungry, surge in volume the moment the killing intent fills the facility. The Nomu's presence hits Izuku's senses like a signal flare, and the thing living in the sand answers it with a rumble of recognition. Monster recognizes monster across the plaza floor. Blood. The voice in his skull whispers, "Blood, blood, blood. Mother wants their blood." Izuku's hands press against the sides of his head. His teeth lock. His body stands completely still, while chaos erupts around him. Students scattering, 13 shouting instructions, the warp villains spreading villains to every zone. The sand in the gourd is restless, shifting, pushing against the container with force that makes it vibrate visibly. Izuku's eyes flutter. The turquoise irises shift, the pupils dilating and contracting in rapid alternation, the sign of the beast testing the boundaries of the seal. "Mother, be still." A group of villains spots him. In the confusion of the attack, with students fleeing and teachers engaging, Izuku stands alone in the plaza, an isolated target, a teenager with a backpack, twitching and muttering. 5 villains converge, their low-tier muscle, enhancement quirks, weapon quirks, the kind of hired bodies that fill out an invasion roster. They see an easy mark. The first one reaches striking distance. The sand sphere closes around Izuku in a fraction of a second. It seals him inside a shell of compressed earth so dense it could tank a missile. The villains hit the exterior with everything they have: fists, blades, energy blasts, and the shell absorbs every impact without marking. Then it answers. Hardened sand spikes fire outward from the sphere's surface in every direction simultaneously. 12 spikes, each one targeted with inhuman accuracy. They punch through shoulders, pin forearms to the ground, skewer thighs against concrete. The villains scream, high, sharp sounds of pain and shock and sudden paralysis. They drop. All 5 of them, in less than a second, reduced from aggressors to pinned, bleeding, helpless shapes on the floor. The sand sphere opens. Izuku steps out. The sand retracts, pulling the spikes back, releasing the pinned bodies to collapse fully onto the concrete. Blood pools around them. They are alive. They will wish they weren't. Izuku walks through the bodies without looking down. His hands are still pressed against his temples. His teeth are still locked. The beast is screaming now. Screaming with joy, with hunger, with the ecstasy of finally being let off the chain for a moment. The sand swirls around Izuku's feet in patterns that respond to the beast's mood more than to Izuku's commands. It wants more. It always wants more. Across the plaza, Aizawa fights with everything he has. His capture scarf whips and binds. His erasure quirk deactivates villains one after another. He is buying time in a fight designed to exhaust him, and he's doing it brilliantly. But the numbers are overwhelming, and the Nomu hasn't moved yet, and everyone in the facility knows that when it does, the equation changes entirely. Shigaraki watches from behind the crowd. His red eyes track the chaos. Then they find Izuku, the boy standing alone in a ring of incapacitated villains, the sand moving around him like a living storm system. Shigaraki's head tilts. Nomu, he says. The word is almost bored. Kill that one. The creature moves. It crosses the plaza in a single leap, a blur of engineered muscle and exposed brain matter that hits the ground in front of Izuku with enough force to crater the concrete. Its fist comes forward, full force. The kind of impact designed to kill All Might through shock absorption and regeneration and overwhelming violence. The fist hits Izuku's sand shield. The shield cracks. A web of fractures spreads across its surface, white lines in the compressed sand that radiate from the impact point like frozen lightning. The sound is enormous, a boom that echoes off Jay's domed ceiling and makes every person in the facility flinch. The shield holds, barely. The Nomu's fist is embedded in its surface up to the wrist, and the sand is working furiously to repair the damage. Grains flowing to fill cracks, density increasing, the shield regenerating around the intrusion. Izuku looks at the Nomu through the translucent barrier of sand. His turquoise eyes meet the creature's vacant stare. The beast in his skull goes silent for a moment. The same silence a predator drops into when it spots something it considers equal. Then Izuku speaks. His voice is flat and empty and carries no fear, because the beast ate his fear years ago and never gave it back. You're loud. Go to sleep. The sand moves from defense to offense in a heartbeat. It releases the shield, the entire structure dissolving from solid back to fluid in an instant, and wraps around the Nomu's extended arm. It climbs. It wraps the other arm. It takes both legs simultaneously. 4 tendrils of living sand, each one as thick as a tree trunk, each one applying pressure from every angle at once. The Nomu's shock absorption is designed for impacts, for punches, kicks, collisions. Force applied in discrete packets from identifiable directions. That is the quirk's architecture. It deflects impact energy by redistributing it through the creature's body. Sand burial is something else entirely. The pressure comes from everywhere. Every grain of sand applies force against every adjacent grain. And the compression is omnidirectional and continuous and has no impact point to deflect from. It is the difference between being punched and being crushed at the bottom of the ocean. The Nomu's absorption quirk has no framework for this. It tries to redistribute the force and finds nothing to redirect because the force has no direction. It simply is. Pressure. Total and increasing, Izuku clenches his right fist. Sand burial. The first limb compresses. The sound is a thunderclap, bone and engineered muscle folding inward under force that treats them like empty cans. The Nomu doesn't scream because it doesn't have the architecture for pain response, but the wet, heavy sound of its arm collapsing fills the plaza with a noise that makes every conscious villain in the facility take a step backward. The second limb, another thunderclap, the third, the fourth. The Nomu hits the floor. Its limbs are wrong, compressed, reduced. The regeneration quirk triggers immediately, flesh bubbling, bone resetting, muscle fibers attempting to rebuild, but the sand doesn't release. It holds the ruined limbs in compression and the regeneration has nowhere to grow. It rebuilds into compressed space and deforms immediately, and rebuilds again and deforms again in an endless agonizing loop of destruction and repair. The creature thrashes, it rolls, it tries to rise on stumps that rebuild and break, and rebuild and break. The sand holds it pinned to the concrete like a butterfly on a board. Izuku watches with his head tilted slightly to one side and his expression carrying all the engagement of someone watching television they've already seen. Shigaraki stares. His hand comes up to his face. The fingers scratch, fast, agitated, the skin at his neck turning raw. His body language shifts from bored commander to something less stable, something that recognizes threat. That's the anti-All Might weapon, he says. His voice cracks at the edges. It took months to build that. How? The warp villain materializes beside him. Kurogiri's yellow eyes glow brighter than usual. Shigaraki Tamura, we should leave. How? Shigaraki's voice rises, his hands spread. One kid. How did one kid do that? That was supposed to kill All Might, and this brat with the sand. Shigaraki Tamura. Kurogiri's voice carries urgency now. The pro-heroes are incoming. We have lost the element of surprise. The Nomu is disabled. We should leave. Shigaraki scratches. His eyes stay fixed on Izuku across the plaza, on the boy standing over his broken weapon with sand swirling around him like a living storm. The rage builds behind Shigaraki's face. The calculation happens. The conclusion arrives. He turns. The warp gate opens. The remaining villains, those still conscious, still mobile, retreat through it. The portal closes. The USJ falls into a silence broken only by the sound of the Nomu's regeneration cycle buzzing uselessly against Izuku's sand restraints. Then the doors burst open. Pro-heroes pour in. Snipe, Power Loader, Ectoplasm, a dozen others responding to Aizawa's distress signal. All Might arrives 2 seconds later, crashing through the ceiling with an impact that cracks the floor of the central plaza. His massive form radiates the authority that earned him the title of Symbol of Peace. His blue eyes sweep the facility. The downed villains, the scattered students, the damaged zones, they find Izuku. All Might sees the boy standing in the center of the plaza, surrounded by incapacitated bodies, standing over a thrashing Nomu that his sand holds in perpetual ruin. He sees the turquoise eyes, the kanji scar, the gourd, the sand that moves with its own will. And he sees something else, something in the boy's posture, in the way his hands press against his head, in the way his lips move in constant inaudible conversation with something only he can hear. All Might has been a hero for decades. He has seen broken people. He has seen people who were used as weapons by those who should have protected them. He recognizes the shape of it even from across a ruined plaza. Young Midoriya, he says. His voice carries across the distance, warm, full, reaching. It's over now. You can let go. Izuku's head turns toward the voice. His turquoise eyes focus, a process that takes visible effort, like surfacing from deep water. The beast's noise fades by 1 degree. The sand around the Nomu loosens, just enough for the pro-heroes to move in and restrain the creature with specialized equipment. Izuku's hands drop from his temples. He blinks. He looks at the destroyed plaza, at the bodies on the ground, at the sand coating every surface within 30 meters of where he stands. Mother, he whispers. They're gone now. Be still. He turns and walks toward the exit. The students of Class 1A gathered at the facility entrance, held back by 13's barricade, watch him pass. Their faces run the full spectrum from shock to fear to awe to something nobody has a word for. Todoroki's mismatched eyes track Izuku's movement with an intensity that borders on obsession. Bakugo's fists are clenched so tight his palms are bleeding from his own nails. The nitroglycerin mixing with blood in a way that stings, and he doesn't notice because his mind is full of what he just watched a classmate do to a weapon designed to kill the strongest man alive. Uraraka steps forward, toward Izuku, against the instinct that tells her to step back. Midoriya, she says, her voice shakes slightly. She controls it. Are you okay? He passes her without stopping, without acknowledging. His eyes stare through her like she's made of glass. But the sand, which spines up at every other approach, stays flat when she speaks. She notices. She files it away. The aftermath of the USJ attack dominates the news cycle for weeks. The narrative centers on All Might, his late arrival, the statement it makes about his declining availability, the growing concern about a symbol of peace who can no longer be everywhere at once. But in the background, in the hero community's private channels, a different conversation takes shape. a student disabled the Nomu, a first year, 15 years old, sand quirk. Did it in under 90 seconds. The name Midoriya Izuku circulates through hero agency reports, intelligence briefings, and faculty meetings with increasing frequency. Aizawa submits his incident report with a single addendum at the bottom that he normally wouldn't include, but felt compelled to. Recommend close monitoring. Student's quirk operates at a level incompatible with standard Class 1A training parameters. Potential danger to self and others if mental state deteriorates. Nezu reads the report. He underlines the last sentence twice. He thinks of a gourd and a scar, and turquoise eyes that carry the weight of a much older grief. And then the sports festival arrives, and everything that has been building since the entrance exam, every whisper, every fearful glance, every unanswered question about the boy with the sand, reaches critical mass in front of a live audience of millions. The UA Sports Festival is Japan's biggest annual event. It replaced the Olympics as the nation's premier competitive spectacle decades ago, and the viewership reflects it. Every screen in the country turns to UA Stadium on the day the first years compete. Agencies watch for recruits. Civilians watch for entertainment. The media covers it like a war. And this year, with the USJ attack still fresh in the public consciousness, the stakes carry extra weight. UA needs to demonstrate strength. The first years need to demonstrate that the next generation of heroes is ready to inherit the mantle. Izuku Midoriya arrives at the stadium looking worse than he has at any point since the start of term. The insomnia has entered a new phase. The beast has been louder since the USJ, agitated by the taste of combat, pushing harder against the seal during the hours Izuku usually fills with motionless waking. His face is gaunt. The rings under his eyes have deepened to the color of bruises, purple-black trenches that give his turquoise irises a luminous, almost radioactive quality. His movements carry a tremor that wasn't there before. His fingers twitch at random intervals. The muttering is constant and barely concealed. Mother, stop. They'll hear you. Mother, please. He wears the UA gym uniform. The gourd is on his back as always. The strap has worn a groove into the fabric of the uniform's shoulder. He walks through the competitor tunnel alone, the other students giving him a radius of at least 4 meters without any verbal agreement to do so. The preliminary rounds pass in a blur. The obstacle race. Izuku rides a wave of sand over every barrier, every trap, every engineered challenge, arriving at the finish line first by a margin so wide the second-place finisher hasn't cleared the third obstacle yet. The cavalry battle. Izuku participates alone. No team. His sand forms a platform that carries him above the arena, while sand tendrils strip headbands from every rider within reach. He finishes with more points than the next 3 teams combined. The crowd watches with the same expression it would wear if a grown man entered a children's contest. The mismatch is so vast it borders on embarrassing, but the crowd is also fascinated. The whispers from the USJ have reached the public now. The Sandquirk kid. The one who broke the record. The one who crushed the monster. They want to see what he does, even as the seeing makes them uncomfortable in ways they can't articulate. He fills them with the same contradictory response that a natural disaster generates, terror and awe compressed into the same emotional space. The tournament bracket is announced. The one-on-one fights. The crowd leans forward in its collective seat. This is what they came for. This is where legacies begin. Izuku's first 2 opponents last less than 30 seconds each. The first, a support course student who won through on a technicality, is encased in sand the moment the buzzer sounds and gently, by Izuku's standards, set down outside the ring boundary. The second, a general studies student with an amplification quirk, shouts a command that hits Izuku's sand shield and bounces off harmlessly. Sand coffin. Sand burial of the arena floor around the student's feet. He sinks to his waist in loose earth, and the match is called. The crowd buzzes. The energy builds. The bracket narrows. Then the screen displays the semifinal matchup, and the stadium's energy shifts into something heavier and more urgent. Midoriya Izuku versus Bakugo Katsuki. Bakugo has been watching. He's been watching since the entrance exam results were posted, since he saw a number next to Midoriya's name that made his own score look like a rounding error. He's been watching since the USJ, since the faculty discussions he shouldn't have overheard confirmed what he already suspected, that the muttering kid in the back corner of the classroom is operating at a level that makes the rest of them look like children playing pretend. And it eats him. It eats Katsuki Bakugo alive from the inside, because Bakugo has built his entire identity on being the strongest, the fastest, the most explosive, the one who wins, always, without question, without exception. He has never met someone he couldn't picture himself surpassing. He has never faced a gap he couldn't bridge with enough fury and enough nitroglycerin and enough raw refusal to accept second place. Until now, he stands in the competitor tunnel. His palms crackle, miniature explosions fire and fade in his clenched fists, the nitroglycerin sweating heavier than usual, feeding on his adrenaline. His teeth are bared. His red eyes burn with something that transcends anger and enters the territory of existential challenge. He has watched Izuku fight. He has seen what the sand does. He knows in the rational part of his brain that he rarely consults that the matchup is wrong, that sand counters explosion the way water counters fire, fundamentally totally at the level of physics. He doesn't care. "I'll kill him," Bakugo mutters. "I'll blast through that sand until there's nothing left. I am the strongest. That freak with his gourd doesn't get to just exist past me. I'm the one who stands at the top. Me." He explodes out of the tunnel into the arena. The crowd roars. Bakugo is a crowd favorite. Explosive, fierce, visually spectacular. Everything a sports broadcast wants in a competitor. His entrance is a wall of heat and light and aggression. Izuku walks up the opposite tunnel. The crowd's roar shifts, dims, hesitates, reforms into something quieter and more uncertain. There is something about watching Izuku enter a combat space that makes cheering feel inappropriate. Like cheering for an earthquake, like applauding a storm. The two stand at opposite ends of the arena. Present Mike's voice booms overhead, narrating the matchup with maximum energy. Midnight raises her whip. The crowd settles. "Begin." Bakugo launches himself forward immediately. No hesitation, no tactical assessment. He crosses the arena in a single blast-propelled leap, his right palm already raised, already sweating, already firing. The explosion hits Izuku's sand shield at point-blank range, a detonation that shakes the arena floor and sends a wave of heat into the first 3 rows of the stands. The shield holds. The sand absorbs the blast, compresses, and redistributes the force across its surface. A cloud of superheated particles floats away from the impact point. Izuku hasn't moved his feet. Bakugo doesn't stop. He spins, fires again. Left palm, right palm, both palms. A rapid sequence of blasts that hammer the shield from every angle. Each one is powerful enough to level a wall. Each one produces a flash of light and a wave of sound that makes the crowd flinch. The stadium fills with the smell of burnt sugar and heated sand. Izuku stands behind his shield with his arms crossed. His turquoise eyes track Bakugo's movement through the translucent barrier of sand. With the same half-interest, he gives everything. The beast murmurs commentary in his skull, amused maybe, contemptuous, probably. "He can't get through," Kirishima whispers from the stands. The red-haired boy is leaning forward with his fists clenched, his eyes huge. He's throwing everything, and it's just absorbing it all. "The sand automatically defends," Todoroki says from 3 seats away. His voice is level, his mismatched eyes fixed on the arena. Bakugo would need to outpace the sand's response time to land a clean hit, and the sand responds to threats before conscious thought. So it's automatic? Faster than automatic. It's instinctive. Bakugo lands 12 meters from Izuku and skids backward. His chest heaves. Sweat, nitroglycerin-laced volatile, runs down his arms in streams. His palms glow with residual heat. The shield in front of Izuku is unmarked. 0 damage. 12 full-power blasts at close range, and the sand absorbed every single one without any visible strain. "Fight me!" Bakugo screams. His voice cracks with frustration that has nowhere to go. "Stop hiding behind your sand and fight me, you hollow-eyed freak." Izuku tilts his head. The movement is small, barely a degree, but it carries the weight of attention finally being granted. His turquoise eyes focus on Bakugo for the first time in the match. "Why?" he says. The word barely carries across the arena, but the microphones in the concrete pick it up and amplify it to the crowd. The single syllable falls into the stadium like a stone into deep water. Bakugo's face contorts. The why hits harder than any counterattack could. It implies, it outright states, that fighting back isn't worth the effort. That Bakugo, with all his fury and all his explosions and all his desperate need to be acknowledged as the strongest, isn't interesting enough to warrant engagement. Why? Bakugo roars it back, because I'm going to be the #1 hero, because I'm stronger than everyone in this arena, and that includes you, because I'll blast your sand into glass and your glass as into dust and your dust into nothing. Fight me. He launches again. This time the explosion is bigger, the largest he's produced all tournament. AP shot maximum. The blast concentrates into a focused beam of force that punches into the sand shield like a lance. The shield deforms, a visible dent, the sand pushed inward, compressed past its resting state. The crowd gasps. For half a second, it looks like the attack might break through. The sand repairs. The dent fills. The shield smooths back to its original shape with the ease of water returning to level after a dropped stone. Bakugo fires again, and again, and again. He becomes a machine of rage and detonation, blasting from every angle, moving at speeds that push his body to its limit, each explosion larger and more desperate than the last. The heat in the arena climbs. The surface of the sand shield begins to change. Grains fusing together under sustained thermal exposure, patches of rough glass forming and breaking and reforming. The light from the crystallization fills the arena with fractured rainbows. It's beautiful. And it's completely futile. Izuku watches. His expression doesn't change. The beast watches through his eyes and makes sounds of amusement, low rumbles that vibrate in Izuku's jaw. The sand handles everything automatically, every blast absorbed, every angle covered, every attack met with perfect defensive response. He's toying with him, Aizawa says from the faculty booth. His voice is flat with something between professional observation and personal unease. Glad Midoriya isn't fighting, he's waiting. Waiting for what? Present Mike asks. Aizawa doesn't answer. His eyes stay on the arena. 3 minutes pass. Then 5. Bakugo has fired more explosions than he has in any single fight in his life. His arms are shaking. His palms are raw, the nitroglycerin glands pushed past comfortable output into the territory of strain and damage. His breathing comes in ragged gasps. The fury hasn't dimmed. If anything, it has intensified, compounding with exhaustion into something toxic and unstable. He lands one more time, 15 meters from Izuku. His stance is wide, his knees shake, his palms smoke. Fight me. The words come between gasps. You coward, you freak, you worthless. Fight me. Izuku uncrosses his arms. It's a small movement. His hands drop to his sides. His fingers uncurl. The sand behind him shifts, the sound changing from defensive hum to something more active, more intentional. The entire energy of the arena changes in the space of a breath. Izuku speaks. I fight only for myself. You are nothing to me. The sand surges forward. It doesn't encase. It doesn't bury. It attacks. Waves of compressed sand slamming into Bakugo from 3 directions simultaneously. The first wave hits his guard and blasts through it. The second catches his legs and sweeps them. The third pins him flat to the arena floor before he can fire a retaliatory explosion. The speed is stunning. 3 movements completed before the crowd finishes processing the first one. Bakugo goes from standing to supine in under a second. He fires from his back. Explosions blast upward at the sand, holding him down. The sand absorbs them and reforms and presses harder. His arms are pinned next to his body. His legs are locked together. The sand covers him from the throat, down like a stone sarcophagus. Heavy, immovable, sealing him against the arena floor with tons of compressive force. Get off me, he screams. The veins in his neck strain against his skin. His face is purple-red with fury and oxygen restriction. I'll kill you, I'll kill you. Get this off. Izuku walks toward him. Slow steps. The sand parts for his feet and closes behind him. He stands over Bakugo's pinned body and looks down at the face of pure rage beneath him with the same absent expression he wears to every class, every meal, every sleepless night. You're finished, Izuku says. The match is over. Stop screaming. But Bakugo doesn't stop. Of course he doesn't stop. Katsuki Bakugo has never stopped in his life. He has never accepted defeat in any form, from any source, for any reason. His body strains against the sand, his palms fire and fire and fire, each explosion smaller than the last as his glands reach depletion, each one producing less light, less heat, less force. But he keeps firing. He keeps screaming. He keeps fighting with a fury so total and so blind that it has passed the point of strategy and entered the realm of pure animal refusal. And then he says it. You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing. You're a monster who sits in the corner and talks to himself. You have zero friends, zero people who care about you. Your own father doesn't want you. You're a weapon he couldn't even control. You're a thing someone made and regretted making. You are nothing. The words hit the arena air and spread, and the microphones catch them, and the crowd hears them. And there is a moment, one of those moments that lives in the breath between cause and effect, where everything in the stadium hangs suspended. Izuku's face changes. The turquoise of his eyes shifts. The pupils reshape, contracting and then dilating in a pattern that doesn't belong to human physiology. The rings under his eyes darken. His breathing changes, deepens, and then something else breathes through him, something older and hungrier and far less restrained than the boy who has been sitting through this match with crossed arms and zero investment. The beast rises. It doesn't take over completely. What happens is worse. What happens is partial. The transformation seizes Izuku's left arm first, the skin shifting color, the flesh compressing and reshaping, the muscle mass increasing as sand flows into and merges with the limb. His arm doubles in size. The fingers extend into claws, thick, curved, the joints wrong in a way that makes the human eye recoil. The sand patterns across the transformed limb pulse with a rhythm that matches a heartbeat faster than Izuku's. A demonic aura bleeds from his body. It rises from his skin like heat off summer pavement, visible, distorting the air around him, carrying a scent that hits the front rows of the stadium like walking into a sauna filled with salt and something burning. The aura carries weight, a psychic pressure that settles on every person in the stadium like a hand pressing down on their chests. The crowd goes completely still. 80,000 people, athletes, spectators, pro heroes, media professionals, security staff. 80,000 humans in a stadium designed for noise and celebration, and every single one of them falls silent at the same moment. The only sound is the sand. It moves around Izuku in accelerating patterns, pulling from the arena floor, from the boundaries, from the soil beneath the concrete. It answers the beast's call. The volume of it grows. The arena begins to disappear beneath a rising tide of earth. Bakugo, still pinned, looks up at what Izuku is becoming. And for the first time in his life, the first time in his memory, fear crosses Katsuki Bakugo's face. Real fear. The kind that lives at the bottom of the brain where rational thought doesn't reach. The kind that says, this thing above you can kill you, and there is nothing in your body or your quirk or your willpower that can prevent it. Izuku looks down at Bakugo. The transformed arm raises. The claws spread. The sand around Bakugo's body tightens. Incrementally, steadily, building pressure toward a threshold that human bone can only tolerate for so long. Die, Izuku whispers. The voice isn't entirely his. Something else speaks through it, something with more teeth in its vowels, more gravel in its consonants. Die. Just die and be quiet. The execution posture. Clawed hand raised, sand compressing. The arena floor cracks in radiating lines from the pressure being generated. Bakugo can't scream anymore. The sand around his chest has compressed too far for full lung expansion. His eyes are wide, his mouth works soundlessly. The explosions from his palms have stopped. His quirk has nothing left to give. In the stands, Kirishima is on his feet. Kaminari is on his feet. Half of Class 1A is on their feet. Their faces carry expressions that range from horror to paralysis. Uraraka has both hands over her mouth. Her eyes are wet. She can see what's about to happen, and every cell in her body is screaming to do something, and she has no idea what something would even look like against what's happening in that arena. Midnight steps forward. Her hand reaches for her quirk activation. The sleep-inducing aroma that could potentially stop this. She looks at Cementos. He's already moving. Concrete barriers rising from the arena floor, pushing toward the center where Izuku stands over Bakugo's body with a demon's arm raised. Neither of them are fast enough. The barriers are 6 meters from Izuku when the sand crushes them to powder. Midnight's aroma hits the sand shield and disperses harmlessly, the living earth filtering it before it reaches Izuku's lungs. The pro heroes in the stadium are reaching for their communicators, their support items, their contingency plans. The word on every channel is the same. Intervention required immediately. Then the stadium shakes. The impact comes from above. A figure descending from the announcer's booth at a speed that breaks the sound barrier, cratering the arena floor with a landing that sends shockwaves through every seat in every row. The figure stands between Izuku and Bakugo's pinned body, and his silhouette fills the arena with the weight of a title that has meant salvation to this country for 30 years. All Might, he is enormous. His hero suit is pristine, the white and blue catching the stadium lights like a flag made of confidence. His smile is set, the smile that has told Japan everything is okay 1,000 times and been believed every single time. But his eyes, behind the smile, deep in the blue, carry something the smile doesn't usually allow. They carry understanding. They carry grief. Enough, young Midoriya! His voice reaches every corner of the stadium without amplification. It fills the space the way his presence fills it, completely, unavoidably, with a weight that makes the air feel solid. The word enough hits Izuku's sand like a physical force. The grains hesitate. The pressure around Bakugo pauses in its tightening. All Might moves. He is beside Bakugo in an instant, hands working, pulling the boy from the sand's grip with strength that treats the compressed earth like cotton. Bakugo comes free with a gasp, lungs expanding, color returning, consciousness swimming back from the edge it was approaching. All Might sets him down outside the sand's radius and turns back. Izuku stares at him. The transformed arm trembles. The aura pulses. The sand hasn't stopped moving. If anything, it has accelerated, pulling more material from the arena, from beneath the stadium, from every accessible source. The gourd is empty. The sand around Izuku is entirely external now. A swirling mass that grows with every second, responding to the beast's escalating energy. The transformation spreads, past the arm, past the shoulder. The left side of Izuku's face begins to shift, the skin darkening, the features distorting, the eye on that side narrowing and yellowing as the beast's influence claims more of the host's body. The silhouette warps. What stands in the center of the arena is losing its human outline. It's becoming something else, something that the oldest part of the human brain recognizes as predator. All Might doesn't step back. He looks at the thing Izuku is becoming, and he sees past it. Past the aura, past the sand, past the transformation and the rage and the beast's hunger. He sees a boy who was 6 when someone carved love into his own face because nobody else was going to do it for him. A boy who was raised as a weapon and punished for being one and told he was nothing by the people who made him. A boy who is 15 years old and has never slept through the night and has never been held and has never heard the words, "It's okay," from someone who meant them. All Might sees all of it, and he makes his decision in the space of a single heartbeat. He waves the other pro heroes back. Powerloader is rising from his station. Snipe has his rifle trained. Endeavor, seated in the VIP section, has already ignited, his flames filling the air around him with killing heat. All Might raises one hand toward all of them. "Stand down," he says. The command voice. Absolute. Final. "This one is mine." He turns back to Izuku. He squares his shoulders. He sets his feet and he walks forward. The sand hits him immediately. A tendril slams his chest, the force of it staggering enough to send a lesser hero through a wall. All Might leans into it and keeps walking. Another tendril, his shoulder this time. The fabric of his hero suit tears. Sand grinds against his skin and draws blood. He keeps walking. "Young Midoriya," he says. His voice is steady, warm, as full and present as a sunrise. "I am coming to you." Izuku's face, half transformed, half human, torn between the beast and the boy, twists. "Stay back." The voice is Izuku's and something else's, layered, doubled. "Stay away from me. The sand, mother, she'll kill you. Stay back." All Might keeps walking. The sand responds with escalating violence. What was tendrils becomes walls, crushing masses that slam into All Might from every direction. He tanks them. His body takes impacts that would level buildings, and he converts the momentum into forward progress. 2 steps. 3. The stadium watches the symbol of peace walk into a sandstorm with the same deliberation that he would use to walk across a room, and the blood on his face and arms multiplies with every step. "You're bleeding," Izuku screams. The human voice breaks through the beast's overlay, the boy surfacing, horrified at what his own power is doing to the person walking toward him. "Stop! You're getting hurt! Why won't you stop?" Because you need someone to keep walking, All Might says. Simple, steady, true. The sand intensifies. It is a storm now. A full desert storm contained within the arena, visibility dropping to 0 for everyone outside the eye. The stands are being pelted with sand shrapnel. Cementos raises barriers to protect the crowd. The noise is incredible. A roar of displaced earth that fills the stadium like a living scream. At the eye, Izuku hovers, lifted by his own sand, the transformation claiming more of his body, the beast's voice roaring in his skull with a volume that drowns everything else. The beast is terrified. For the first time in 15 years of parasitic cohabitation, the beast is afraid. Afraid of losing its grip, afraid of the warmth approaching through the storm, afraid of the possibility that its host might receive something it can never provide. And so it fights. It throws everything the sand has at the approaching figure. It commands the storm to bury, to crush, to erase. All Might walks through it. His suit is gone, shredded. His skin is lacerated in 100 places, sand cuts that bleed freely, staining his costume's remnants red. His arms are raised to shield his face, but he doesn't stop moving forward. Each step costs him. Each step is bought with blood and will and the simple, unshakable decision that this child deserves someone who will keep walking no matter what stands between them. Wind bullets fire from the partial shukaku form, compressed air launched at speeds that split sound. They hit All Might's torso. He grunts, his feet slide backward an inch. He finds his footing and steps forward again. The sand buries him to the waist. He tears himself free. His muscles strain against force that would hold a tank stationary. His legs drive forward through earth that tries to swallow him whole. 10 meters from Izuku. 8. 5. The sand makes one final attempt. A wall, solid, dense, 2 meters thick, rises between them. The last barrier. The beast's final defense against a threat it doesn't know how to fight. Kindness approaching with intent. All Might draws his fist back. He punches through the wall. The sand explodes outward. All Might stumbles through the gap, bleeding, exhausted, his body pushed further than it has been pushed in years. He stands inside the eye of the storm, face to face with Izuku Midoriya, 15 years old, half transformed, crying without tears, shaking so badly the ground beneath him trembles. Why? Izuku screams it, and the scream is all boy and no beast. Why won't you die? Why won't you hate me like everyone else? Just hate me. That is what you're supposed to do. That is what everyone does. Hate me and leave. Why won't you just leave me alone? Every word fractures at its edges. Every word carries the weight of 9 years of isolation and abandonment and weaponized existence. Every word is a plea disguised as a demand. A child begging to be hated because hate is the only response he has ever received and the only one he knows how to survive. All Might opens his arms. The sand spikes that punch through his shoulders are instantaneous. 2 of them, one through each deltoid, entering from the front and exiting through the back. Blood sprays in arcs that catch the stadium lights. All Might's body jerks. His jaw clenches. A sound like pain caught between his teeth. The spikes remain. The sand holding them rigid, pinning him in place like nails through wood. He steps forward anyway. The spikes move with him, the sand either unable or unwilling to withdraw them. He walks with iron rods of compressed earth through his shoulders and his arms still open and his face still carrying that smile. But the smile has changed. It isn't the performance smile. It isn't the media smile. It is the smile of a man who is in genuine pain and has chosen to feel it because the person in front of him needs to know that pain doesn't equal retreat. He reaches Izuku. He wraps his arms around the boy, around the transformation, around the sand, around the aura and the beast and the 15 years of accumulated horror that radiates from Izuku's body like heat from a furnace. He holds him. He holds him the way a father holds a child who has been lost and is now found. The way someone holds a person they refuse to let go of regardless of what holding costs them. Because you are a boy, All Might says. His mouth is near Izuku's ear. His voice shakes, but the words are steady, chosen, absolute. You are not a monster. You are not a weapon. You are not a thing someone made and regretted. You are Izuku Midoriya. You are 15 years old. You have been alone for your entire life and you have survived it, survived everything. And you are still here, still standing, still breathing, and that means something. Izuku's body is rigid. every muscle locked. The sand spikes in All Might's shoulders pulse, responding to the beast's rage, to its desperate command to push this man away, to reject the impossible warmth of unconditional acceptance. You are a boy who has been alone for far, far too long. All Might continues. You have been fighting the nightmare by yourself your entire life, and you've been doing it without anyone standing beside you, and that ends right now. The transformation flickers. The clawed arm trembles, the sand patterns on its surface destabilizing. Let go, Izuku. The name is spoken with so much gentleness it sounds like a prayer. You don't have to hold on anymore. I am here. I am right here. I am holding on, and I will keep holding on until you believe me. The sand goes still. Every grain, every particle in the storm, in the arena, in the walls and the barriers and the air itself goes perfectly, impossibly, completely still. The storm freezes mid-motion. The wind dies. The stadium, blasted by sand for the last 3 minutes, suddenly enters a silence so total that 80,000 people can hear the blood dripping from All Might's shoulders onto the arena floor. Izuku's face is pressed against All Might's chest. His eyes are wide. His pupils are normal, human. The yellow fading from the left eye, the transformation receding like a tide going out. His body shakes. His breathing hitches. The beast screams in his skull. It screams to fight, to reject, to kill, to return to the safety of isolation where nothing can reach and nothing can hurt. It screams the way it has screamed for 15 years. The constant voice, the constant pressure, the constant demand to destroy. And for the first time in his life, Izuku tells it to be quiet. He doesn't speak the words aloud. He doesn't need to. Something inside him, some thread of connection between the boy and the parasite, carries the command. And the command isn't rage. It isn't violence. It isn't the familiar language of blood and survival that the beast responds to best. It is exhaustion. Pure, complete, cellular exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone who has been awake for 10 years and has reached at last the absolute bottom of what willpower can sustain. The beast goes silent. For the first time since the night Chio died, for the first time in 9 years, the voice stops. The storm collapses. Sand rains down across the ruined arena in a slow, gentle curtain. It falls like snow. It covers the cracked concrete, the shattered barriers, the destroyed seats in the front rows. It settles on the shoulders of the pro heroes frozen at the arena's edge. It coats the cameras that are broadcasting this moment to every screen in Japan. The whole stadium is dusted in a layer of fine, golden earth. And in the center of it all, in the eye of the aftermath, All Might holds a boy. Izuku's transformed arm dissolves. The sand that made it rejoin the rest, falling away from his flesh like shed skin, leaving behind a human limb that is pale and thin and trembling. His face presses harder into All Might's chest. His hands release from their fists and grab, desperately, with the strength of a drowning person finding a handhold, the remains of All Might's hero suit. The first sob comes. It rips out of him like a structural beam giving way. It carries the sound of 9 years of unshed grief. It is ugly and raw and total. A sound that has been building in his chest for so long that its release feels geological. The second sob follows. The third. They come faster, building, overlapping. Izuku Midoriya, the boy who carved love into his own face and declared himself the only thing worth protecting, cries. He cries like a child. He cries the way a 6-year-old should have cried when the body of the only person who loved him hit the floor. He cries the way a 10-year-old should have cried in his windowless room, with the censors watching and the handlers refusing to touch him. He cries the way a human being cries when years of accumulated pain are finally given permission to leave the body. All Might holds him through every second of it. The sand spikes in his shoulders dissolve, the grains falling away, the wounds bleeding freely, the pain ignored completely in favor of keeping his arms around the shaking body pressed against his chest. His massive hands rest on Izuku's back, between the shoulder blades, above the gourd's strap groove. He holds him with the steady pressure of something immovable, something eternal, something that will still be here when the crying stops. "I've got you," he says. "I've got you, my boy. I'm here. I'm staying." Izuku's hands tighten on the fabric. His knuckles go white. His body heaves with the force of the sobs. The sound he makes is somewhere between a scream and a whimper. the vocal expression of a dam breaking, of a decade of pressure finding its first ever release valve. The stadium watches. 80,000 people watch a boy cry in the arms of the symbol of peace, and they understand, every single one of them, from the pro heroes to the general admission spectators to the commentators who have gone silent behind their microphones, that they are witnessing something more important than any fight, more important than any score, more important than any tournament bracket or rivalry or spectacle. They are watching a rescue. In the stands, Uraraka is crying. She's been crying since All Might opened his arms. Tears stream down her round cheeks, and she makes no effort to wipe them because her eyes refuse to leave the arena. Beside her, Ida stands with his fists pressed against his thighs and his jaw locked and his eyes burning, because he is a man who believes in heroism with every fiber of his body, and he has never seen it performed as purely as what he is watching right now. Todoroki sits with his hands in his lap. His mismatched eyes are fixed on the arena with an intensity that borders on pain. He is watching a boy whose father built him into a weapon receive from a stranger what that father never gave. The parallel strikes Todoroki like a blade between the ribs. His left hand, the fireside, trembles. Bakugo sits where All Might set him down at the arena's edge. His body works, his lungs function, his eyes are open, but his brain is somewhere very far away, processing something it has zero framework for. The kid he called nothing, the weapon he named worthless, is crying in the arms of the number one hero, and the entire stadium is watching, and nobody is looking at Katsuki Bakugo. For the first time in his life, he is completely, absolutely irrelevant to the story happening in front of him. And the worst part, the part that will keep him awake tonight and many nights after, is that he understands why. In the announcer's booth, present mic is silent. His headset mic is live. The entire nation is waiting for commentary. He has nothing. There are no words in his vocabulary, no level of yeah or wow that fit what is happening in that arena. He sits with his mouth closed and lets the silence be the commentary. Aizawa beside him leans forward with his elbows on the console. His erasure goggles are pushed up on his forehead. His eyes, usually narrow, usually carrying the calculated disinterest of a man who trusts nothing, are wide. His capture scarf hangs loose around his neck. His hands are still. In the faculty section, Midnight has her whip at her side, unused. Cementos has lowered his barriers. 13 watches through her helmet visor with a posture that suggests prayer. Nezu sits on his elevated cushion with his paws folded and his black eyes glistening in a way that could be reflected stadium light and could be something else entirely. Recovery Girl is already moving. She's out of her seat, crossing the faculty section, heading for the arena access tunnel. Her cane clicks against the concrete with urgent rhythm. Her face is set in the expression of a healer who has identified her patient. On screens across Japan, in homes, in offices, in public plazas where crowds have gathered to watch the sports festival, 80 million people see what the stadium sees. They see a boy who was introduced to them as a monster, crying in the arms of a hero who chose to see him as a child. They see blood on All Might's shoulders and sand on his skin, and a smile on his face that doesn't waver. They see a gourd on the ground, released from the boy's back for the first time anyone can recall, lying on its side in the sand like a discarded shell. And they feel it, the thing that makes heroism real, the thing that separates a person who can punch hard from a person who deserves the title, the willingness to walk into someone else's storm, the willingness to bleed for someone who doesn't know they're worth bleeding for, the choice made in real time in front of cameras before an audience of millions to hold on. The sobs slow, they space out. The heaving of Izuku's body eases from violent to gentle. His breathing finds something approaching rhythm, still ragged, still broken at the edges, but approaching a pattern that looks like the first steps of a descent from total collapse. His hands loosen on All Might's suit. His weight shifts, less desperate grip, more steady lean. The exhaustion that has been stalking him for a decade finally catches up. All Might feels the change. He feels the boy's body going heavy in his arms, the muscles releasing, the tension leaving, the consciousness dimming. He adjusts his grip. He holds Izuku's full weight with no visible effort, cradling the boy the way one cradles something precious and infinitely fragile. Sleep, All Might says softly. The microphones barely catch it. The stadium is so silent that they catch it anyway. You have earned it 1,000 times over. Sleep and know that when you wake up, I will still be here. Sleep, young man. You are safe. Izuku's turquoise eyes, red-rimmed, swollen, emptied of everything, look up at All Might's face. The kanji on his forehead catches the stadium light. Love. Written in blood and sand by a child who believed it was the only kind he would ever receive. His lips move. The words are almost inaudible. Will you still be here? I promise. Izuku Midoriya, the sand demon, the boy who crushed the Nomu, who buried the zero-pointer, who held the highest entrance exam score in UA history, who carried a beast in his skull and a desert on his back and a father's abandonment in his chest for 15 years, closes his eyes, the sand settles. Every grain, everywhere, in the arena, on the stands, in the air, goes still. It rests. For the first time in 10 years, the sand rests, because the boy who commands it has finally stopped fighting. He sleeps. The weight of it, the impossibility of it, registers across the stadium in waves. Recovery Girl arrives at the arena floor and sees it and freezes mid-step. A boy who hasn't slept in a decade, sleeping in the arms of the symbol of peace. She covers her mouth with one weathered hand. Her eyes fill. In the stands, someone begins to clap. A single person, lost in the back rows, anonymous. The sound is small in the vast stadium, then someone joins it, then another, then a section, then a wave. The applause builds, slowly, from scattered individuals to rows to sections to the entire stadium. 80,000 people standing, clapping, some of them crying, all of them staring at the arena where All Might stands with a sleeping boy in his arms and sand settling around them like benediction. It fills the stadium. It fills the broadcast. It fills the homes and offices and public plazas where 80 million people watched something they will never forget. All Might shifts Izuku in his arms. He cradles the boy against his chest, one arm beneath the knees, one arm behind the shoulders. The gourd on the ground stirs, the sand inside it shifting, rolling, resettling in the absence of its master's waking commands. It seems quieter now. Resting, like him, All Might carries Izuku Midoriya out of the arena. The applause follows them, swelling, filling the tunnels, echoing through the stadium's bones. All Might walks with the steady gait of a man carrying something worth more than any trophy. His blood drips onto the concrete. His wounds remain open. His smile, the real one, the one that costs him nothing because it comes from the truest place inside him, stays fixed on the sleeping face of the boy in his arms. In the announcer's booth, Present Mike finally reaches for his microphone. His voice, when it comes, is stripped of its usual amplified bravado. It is human, it is small, it carries the weight of what everyone just witnessed. Ladies and gentlemen, he says, the semifinal match between Midoriya Izuku and Bakugo Katsuki has been resolved. A pause, a breath. The tournament bracket will be updated following a recess of however long it takes. Another pause. I think we all need a minute. He clicks the mic off, he removes his headset, he puts his face in his hands. Beside him, Aizawa reaches over, without looking, without comment, and places one hand on Present Mike's shoulder. It stays there. And in the medical wing beneath the stadium, All Might lays Izuku Midoriya on a cot. Recovery Girl is already there, her healing quirk at the ready, her eyes assessing, her professional instincts firing on every cylinder. But when she looks at the boy on the cot, at the sleeping face, at the relaxed posture, at the expression of peace that looks foreign on those hollowed features, she hesitates. Let him sleep, she says softly. The rest can wait. Let him sleep. All Might pulls a chair beside the cot. He sits. His wounds bleed through the bandages Recovery Girl pressed against his shoulders 3 minutes ago. His body aches in places he hasn't ached in years. His hands rest on his knees, and his eyes rest on Izuku's face. And he does what he promised. He stays. Izuku Midoriya sleeps. For the first time in 9 years, for the first time since the night that made him what he is, the boy who carries a desert on his back and a demon in his skull finds rest. The beast is silent. The sand is still. The voices that have screamed for blood and company and destruction every single night for a decade are gone, replaced by something Izuku has never experienced and therefore has no name for: peace. It settles over the medical wing like a blanket. It fills the spaces between heartbeats. It soaks into the walls and the floor and the air, and it holds stubbornly, completely, against every force that has ever tried to take it from this boy. Outside, the stadium hums with conversation. The commentators break down what happened. The crowds process. The hero agencies send messages. The media writes headlines that will dominate the news cycle for weeks. Hisashi Midoriya, watching from a screen in his office 400 kilometers away, sees his weapon crying in the arms of the number one hero and feels something shift in his calculations that he will never recover from. The asset has been compromised. The weapon has found something harder to fight than enemies. It has found someone willing to stand in the storm and refuse to leave. Hisashi Midoriya sits at his desk 400 kilometers from the stadium, where his son just fell asleep in the arms of the number one hero, and the footage on his screen replays in a loop that he watches with the attention of a man reviewing a failed investment portfolio. The image is damning in every direction. His son, his project, his line item, his classified weapon system, held like a child by the symbol of peace, while a national audience watches and weeps and assigns meaning to the gesture that Hisashi has spent 15 years stripping from the boy's life. The phone in his hand connects to a number 3 layers above anything the public knows about. The voice on the other end wears a government badge and speaks in frequencies that bypass electoral politics entirely. "I need a reclassification order," Hisashi says. His voice carries the even timbre of a man who has made this call before. The asset has been exposed to unsanctioned influence. "I need containment authorization transferred from institutional custody to state processing under Article 19. The voice on the other end asks a question. The timeline is immediate. The longer the asset remains under All Might's influence, the less recoverable the conditioning becomes. "I need a retrieval team with commission backing and a containment specialist rated for Class S sand manipulation. 2 days. He ends the call. He sets the phone on the desk next to the monitor where the footage continues to loop. All Might's bloody smile, Izuku's sleeping face, the kanji scar catching stadium light. Hisashi looks at it the way he looks at spreadsheets that have returned unexpected numbers, an anomaly requiring correction. A variable that slipped its equation. He picks up the phone again. He dials a second number, then a third. The machine that built Izuku Midoriya into a weapon begins moving its gears toward recovery. It has functioned for 15 years without failure. It operates on the assumption that the weapon belongs to the hand that forged it. And that assumption has never been challenged by anything stronger than itself. The machine does not know what it is moving toward. It does not know that the boy sleeping in the medical wing beneath the UA stadium is doing something that changes every calculation Hisashi has ever run. Something the machine has zero framework for, zero protocol against, zero contingency to address. He is resting. And rest, for Izuku Midoriya, is the most dangerous thing he has ever been allowed to do. Morning light enters the medical wing through windows that face east. The room is white and clean and holds the smell of antiseptic and the lingering trace of Recovery Girl's healing salve. The cot sits against the far wall. The gourd sits on the floor beside it, its surface catching the new light in shades of burnt gold. The chair pulled close to the cot holds All Might, slumped forward, chin touching his chest, his massive frame compacted into a position that looks deeply uncomfortable and has been held through the entire night without shifting. The bandages on his shoulders show rust-colored spots where the wounds bled through during the hours of stillness. His hands rest on his knees. His breathing is even and deep, and carries the rhythm of someone who chose to stay awake as long as possible and lost the fight sometime around 4 in the morning. Izuku Midoriya opens his eyes. The ceiling is white. The light is gold. The beast is present, still there, still occupying the space behind his thoughts where it has lived for 15 years, still rumbling at the low frequency that Izuku has learned to interpret the way someone reads weather patterns. But the rumble is different this morning. It carries less demand, less urgency. The voices that have screamed for blood and contact and destruction through every moment of every waking hour for the past decade are still audible, but the volume has decreased by several magnitudes. They sound like something heard through a wall rather than something broadcast directly into the center of his skull. He lies on his back and breathes, In and out. The rhythm is steady in a way his breathing has never been steady. His heartbeat sits at a pace he has never experienced. Low, even, constant. The exhaustion remains. A decade of sleep debt carved into his bones and his nervous system and the hollows beneath his eyes. But beneath the exhaustion, there is something solid. A floor where there used to be a drop. A foundation where there used to be free fall. He sits up. The movement is slow and measured and carries none of the jerky, twitching energy that has characterized his physical existence since childhood. His turquoise eyes move across the room, taking in the windows, the medical equipment, the chair, the man in the chair, the bandages on the man's shoulders, the spots of blood that came from wounds Izuku's sand put there and that the man walked through without stopping. All Might stirs. His head lifts. The blue eyes find Izuku's face immediately. The instinct of someone who promised to be present at the moment of waking and has been waiting for exactly this, even in sleep. "You're awake," All Might says. His voice is rough with sleep, but warm in the way morning sunlight is warm. Present without demand. Available without condition. Izuku looks at him. He looks at the bandaged shoulders. He looks at the hands that held him through a sandstorm, while his power tore the arena apart, and his beast screamed for blood. His jaw tightens. His turquoise eyes carry something they have never carried in All Might's presence before. Recognition. The recognition of something received that was never expected, and still has no name in Izuku's vocabulary because the concept was absent from his life until 12 hours ago. "You stayed." The words leave his mouth in his permanent rasp, the voice of someone who has spent more hours speaking to the thing in his skull than to any living person. 2 words, flat in tone, but the weight beneath them fills the room the way sand fills a vessel. "I said I would." All Might's answer is simple. It carries the same tone his arms carried in the stadium, steady, present, refusing to make the moment larger than the boy needs it to be. A beat passes. Morning light moves across the floor. The gourd stirs once, a single roll of the sand inside, like something turning over in its sleep. Then Izuku says, in a voice so low it barely crosses the meter of air between the cot and the chair, "Nobody has ever done that before." The sentence sits in the room like a stone dropped into still water. 4 words that contain 10 years of solitary confinement and weaponized childhood and the absence of every human thing that other 15-year-olds take for granted. All Might hears all of it. His face does something complex. A tightening around the eyes, a set to the jaw, the contained response of a man who will never cry in front of this boy because this boy needs to see strength from the people who choose him. "Then everyone before me was wrong," All Might says. "And I will keep being right about you for as long as you will let me." The room holds the moment. It does not demand more of it. Izuku does not cry. The crying happened in the arena, and it emptied something that needed emptying, and what remains is steadier for the loss. He simply looks at All Might with those cracked turquoise eyes and the kanji on his forehead catching the light, and the faintest shift happens in the architecture of his face. It would be invisible to anyone who had known him less than a lifetime. To Recovery Girl, who enters the room 14 seconds later with bandage, supplies, and a thermometer, it looks like a boy's face deciding to live. "Good morning," Recovery Girl says. Her voice is professional, but her eyes are soft behind her glasses. She has treated hundreds of students. She has healed broken bones and torn muscles and quirk exhaustion in quantities that would fill medical textbooks. She has never treated a patient whose primary condition is a decade of enforced sleeplessness caused by a parasitic entity bonded to his central nervous system. "How do you feel?" Izuku considers the question. His hand moves, reaches for the gourd beside the cot, touches its surface. The sand inside shifts toward his palm, pressing against the interior wall like something seeking contact. "Different," he says. That is all he gives her. 2 days later, Izuku Midoriya is back in the Class 1A dormitory. The sports festival has been concluded in his absence. The bracket resolved through elimination matches that featured the remaining competitors, and crowned a winner whose name Izuku does not know and does not ask about. What matters to the story of his life is happening elsewhere, in offices and encrypted phone lines and convoy routes, and it arrives on the second evening after his return in the form of a professional knock on his dormitory door. He has slept 2 nights running. Fractured sleep. The beast still pushes against it, still resists the vulnerability of unconscious hours, still fills the twilight between waking and rest with whispers that have fangs. But sleep. 2, sometimes 3 hours at a stretch before the jolt of adrenaline wakes him and the sand reforms its shell around his body. The difference those hours make is written in his posture and his face, and the way his fingers twitch less and his eyes move slower, and the sand responds to his commands with a lag time approaching 0. The knock comes at 8 in the evening. Izuku is sitting on the floor of his room, the position he has occupied through 15 years of waking, cross-legged, gored against his spine, but his eyes are open and present and tracking the door before the knuckles touch wood. Midoriya Izuku. The voice is female, clipped professional. This is a Class B quirk containment order issued under the Public Safety Authority Act. You are to accompany us to a secure processing facility for reclassification and transfer to state custody, pending evaluation of. The door opens. Izuku stands in the frame. He is wearing the same sand-colored layers he always wears, clothes that have absorbed so much of the gourd's ambient material that they feel like extensions of the weapon rather than fabric. The rings under his eyes remain. The kanji remains. But the eyes themselves, the eyes that faced the world with vacancy for 15 years, that looked through people like they were glass, that carried the dead weight emptiness of someone who expected nothing from any interaction, those eyes look at the 6 government-sanctioned heroes in his hallway with something new. Presence. Total, focused, undivided presence. He sees the badge. He reads the classification order in the woman's hand. Gunjin, tall, confident, her quirk already manifesting as thin lines of luminous energy around her fingers, ready to deploy. He counts the 5 others behind her, 3 men, 2 women, each one carrying the physical language of someone trained to handle Class S quirk users, each one carrying the barely concealed tension of someone who has read a briefing file on what this boy did at the sports festival and is deeply aware of what the sand in that gourd can do to human bodies. "My father sent you," Izuku says. The words come out flat and final, a statement of fact rather than a question. Gunjin maintains her composure. "Please come with us willingly. Resistance will result in escalation under Section." The sand pours out of Izuku's room. It comes over his shoulders in a wave that fills the corridor wall to wall, floor to ceiling in under a second. The sound it makes is the sound of a desert exhaling. A rushing, grinding, total displacement of air that pushes the 6 heroes backward a half step before they can process what is happening. The light from the dormitory hallway fixtures disappears as the sand covers the ceiling. The space becomes a tunnel of living earth, with Izuku Midoriya standing at its center like a heart pumping sand through arteries of stone. Gunjin reacts. She is good. Better than good. She is elite. And her quirk fires in the instant the sand reaches her personal radius. Lines of luminous energy lance outward from her fingers, binding constructs that wrap portions of the sand in lattices of light, freezing sections of the wave mid-motion. The light cuts through the grains the way a blade cuts rope, separating the bound sand from the free sand and holding it immobile. For 4 seconds, her quirk functions exactly as designed. 4 sections of the corridor wave hang frozen in luminous cages while the rest of the sand flows around them. Izuku's eyes track the binding quirk. His head tilts 1 degree to the left. The assessment takes 2 seconds. The light constructs function at a specific energy density that has a threshold for mass containment. The sand within the constructs begins to compress. Grain presses against grain. Density increases. The mass within the binding lattice doubles, then triples, then passes the threshold that Gunjin's quirk can sustain. The luminous cages fracture. The sound is like breaking glass, sharp like cascading, the light lattices shattering into particles that dissolve in the air. The sand they held resumes its flow without interruption. Gunjin's eyes go wide. She fires again. Faster, tighter, the lattices contracted to smaller surface areas for greater density tolerance. It is the correct tactical adjustment. It buys her 2 additional seconds. It is insufficient. The sand takes her feet first, flowing up from the floor, wrapping her ankles, climbing her legs before the second set of lattices finishes forming. She fires downward, trying to sever the connection between the sand at her legs and the wave above. The sand responds from behind, wrapping her forearms, covering her hands, sealing the source of her quirk in compressed earth before she can generate a third lattice. She is encased to the shoulders in 12 seconds. Her head remains free, hair displaced, eyes huge, breathing rapid but controlled. The 5 other heroes engage simultaneously. Enhancement quirk, fists hitting the sand wall and finding it dense enough to absorb the impacts without yielding. Flame quirk, heat that turns the outer layer of sand to glass that immediately cracks under the pressure of the moving mass beneath it and becomes powder that rejoins the flow. Vibration quirk, a pulse that disrupts sand cohesion in a localized field, scattering grains for approximately 2 seconds before the beast's signal reestablishes the connection and the grains snap back into formation. Barrier quirk, a shield that the sand simply flows around, finding the user from the back and the sides simultaneously. Gravity quirk, an alteration that makes the sand heavier, which changes nothing, because Izuku has been carrying this weight his entire life and the beast's strength has no ceiling measured in kilograms. 40 seconds. The corridor returns to stillness. 6 government-sanctioned heroes stand buried from the neck down in hardened sand, spaced along the hallway like buried fence posts. Their faces are exposed. Their bodies are immobile. The sand around them has compressed to the density of concrete, holding them with absolute authority, allowing breath but nothing else. Izuku walks through them. His footsteps are the only sound in the corridor, soft impacts of worn shoes on the thin layer of sand that coats the floor. He passes Gunjin and crouches, picking up the containment order from where it fell during the engagement. His turquoise eyes read the document. The legal language, the signatures, the seal that carries his father's fingerprints all over it, even if the name on the order belongs to someone 3 steps removed. The sand crushes the paper to dust. The white particles scatter across the floor like spilled salt. Izuku stands. He faces Gunjin, her exposed face, her professional composure cracked at the edges, her eyes carrying the forced steady gaze of someone maintaining dignity in a circumstance that has comprehensively outmatched them. "Tell my father," Izuku says, his voice carrying the even weight of a sentence that has already ended before it begins, that the project ended. He walks away from the corridor. The sand remains, holding the 6 heroes in place for exactly as long as Izuku decides they stay, which will be until UA faculty arrives to process the unauthorized intrusion. His footsteps carry him toward the dormitory stairwell. He does not look back. Doors along the corridor are cracked open. Faces fill the gaps. Class 1A students who heard the commotion and witnessed the exchange through whatever viewing angle their positions allowed. Kirishima stands in his doorframe with his hardening quirk half-activated, his jaw hanging open. Kaminari peers around his door's edge with the expression of someone who just watched a nature documentary become real. Tokoyami's door is fully open, his bird head tilted at an angle that suggests his shadow entity is deeply alert. Yaoyorozu stands with one hand on her doorframe and the other pressed flat against her sternum, her face carrying the controlled shock of someone processing strategic information at high speed. Every one of them watched 6 professional heroes, people with government badges and containment quirks and official paperwork, get buried in 40 seconds by a classmate who never raised his voice. But the thing they noticed, the thing that separates this from the entrance exam footage and the USJ reports and the sports festival broadcast, is how he looked doing it. There was no twitching. There were no muttered conversations with the thing in his skull. There was no sand spining up involuntarily, no beast testing its boundaries through the boy's body. What they watched was intent. Clean, focused, directed intent. The sand did exactly what Izuku told it to do and nothing else. And the boy who told it moved through the encounter like someone walking through a room he had already mapped. The version of Midoriya Izuku who walked into the entrance exam was a storm system with a pulse. The version who just disabled 6 containment specialists in under a minute is something else entirely. He is a decision that carries a desert behind it. Todoroki stands at the end of the corridor where the stairwell door is closing behind Izuku's retreating form. His mismatched eyes, blue and gray, ice and fire, the inheritance of a father who also built his child for purposes the child never chose, watch the door until it finishes closing. He's staying, Todoroki says. The words carry the weight of someone who recognizes the shape of a person deciding to stop running. Nobody in the corridor answers. They do not need to. The evidence is written in sand on every surface of the hallway. 3 weeks pass. The Hero Commission does not send a second team. Nezu, operating through channels that Hisashi cannot reach and with alliances that Hisashi's political leverage cannot dissolve, files an injunction against the containment order that cites 17 violations of student protection law and 4 constitutional privacy statutes. The injunction holds. Hisashi's legal team pushes back. The counter-push arrives faster and harder, and with more institutional backing than anything Hisashi has encountered in his career. He does not know that Nezu has been waiting for this fight since the day a sparse classified file arrived on his desk with a boy's name on it and insufficient information inside it. The principal of UA is a genius-level intellect with resources that span decades of accumulated favors, and he has decided that Izuku Midoriya stays at this school. The Commission, stymied in its direct approach, pivots to what it does when brute force fails. It creates a scenario designed to produce the result it wants through manufactured observation. An emergency joint training exercise announced with 72 hours notice, structured as a performance evaluation that any educator in the room recognizes for what it is. A pressure test, calibrated to make an unstable student crack in front of cameras that feed directly to Commission oversight monitors. 3 pro-hero teams are assigned to the exercise. Each team has been briefed on Midoriya Izuku's psychological profile, the one Hisashi's handlers compiled over 9 years of observation, the one that describes a boy on the edge of psychotic break, 1 stimulus away from full beast emergence, 1 confrontation away from the kind of public incident that justifies permanent containment. Each team has been instructed, off-record, verbally, in language that leaves no paper trail, to push the Class 1A formation until the boy in the center breaks. The exercise zone is an outdoor environment, a simulated disaster area covering 3 city blocks of constructed terrain, rubble, collapsed structures, blocked roads, environmental hazards. Class 1A assembles at the staging area in gym uniforms, the pro-hero teams positioned at 3 entry points around the perimeter. The scenario is announced as a hostile suppression exercise. 3 villain teams, played by the Pras, will attempt to breach the central zone while Class 1A defends. Aizawa stands at the staging area's edge. His face carries the tight expression of a man who recognizes a setup when he sees one, and has filed his formal objection and been overruled, and is now watching his students enter a situation designed to weaponize one of them against the rest. His eyes find Izuku in the formation. Standing at the rear, gourd on his back, turquoise eyes already scanning the terrain with the focus of someone reading a battlefield the way others read a menu. This is a standard defense formation exercise, Aizawa says to the class. His voice is level, but every student who knows him hears the edge beneath it. 3 teams will attempt coordinated breach from the east, west, and north positions. Your objective is to prevent complete breach for 30 minutes. Standard rules of engagement. No lethal force. The exercise is being monitored by commission evaluators. He pauses. His eyes sweep the class. The class. Fight smart. The meaning beneath the words reaches Izuku the same way it reaches every student in the formation. The commission is watching. They are looking for a reason. They are looking for the beast. The exercise begins. The 3 pro-hero teams move at once. Coordinated, aggressive, entering the terrain from their assigned positions with the confidence of experienced combatants who have been told their targets are teenagers in training. The Eastern team hits first, driving toward the central zone through the rubble field. The Western team flanks wide, looking for gaps in perimeter coverage. The Northern team feints, drawing attention before pulling back to reassess the behavior of a team looking for vulnerability in a defense they expect to be hollow. 30 seconds in, Izuku speaks. He does not raise his voice. He does not shout orders or rally his classmates with speech-making. He speaks at the same volume he always uses, the rasp that barely carries past his own lips. and the people nearest him hear it, and the information spreads outward through proximity and repetition. Todoroki. East wall. Full ice barrier at the rubble line. Leave a gap at the third collapsed building. Todoroki moves without hesitation. He has spent 3 weeks watching the boy in the back corner of the classroom transform from a weapon that frightened him into something else. Something that carries the same father-shaped wound Todoroki carries, and has found a way to stand upright through it. He trusts the command the way he would trust a structural diagnosis from an engineer. His right foot stamps the ground, and ice erupts in a wall that seals the eastern approach except for a single gap at the position Izuku specified. Uraraka, top of the northern building. Remove gravity from anything that enters through the north faint corridor. Uraraka nods. She moves, scaling the debris with the zero gravity bounce that makes her mobility one of the best in the class. Her face is focused. Her eyes find Izuku's for 1 second before she goes, and in that second, something passes between them that is too small for cameras and too large for words. He sees her. He sees her, and he is asking her to do something, and the asking is trust in a form Uraraka has been trying to earn since the day she sat at his empty cafeteria table and said good morning to a wall of sand spines. Bakugo. Eastern gap. Everything that comes through, destroy. Bakugo's head turns. His red eyes hit Izuku's turquoise ones. The contact holds for 2 full seconds. Loaded with every word Bakugo shouted in the arena, every accusation, every name he threw like a grenade into the space between them. The sports festival sits in the air between their gazes like something that will never fully settle. Bakugo goes east. He goes because the assignment is violence, and violence is where Bakugo excels, and the boy giving the order knows this. He goes because refusing would mean standing still while everyone else moves, and Bakugo has never been the person who gets left behind. The rest of the class receives their positions in the same efficient transfer. Ida maintaining communications between groups, Yao Yorozu generating defensive equipment at the western flank, Kirishima and Sato forming the physical barrier line, Tokoyami providing shadow coverage in the approach corridors where light is limited. 18 students, each placed in the role that matches their capabilities with an accuracy that suggests the person assigning them has been watching, really watching, with the deep attention of someone who has nothing else to do in a classroom but observe. For months, the Eastern Pro team hits Todoroki's ice wall. They adjust, moving toward the gap, the obvious weakness, the exploitable opening in the defense. 3 heroes pour through the gap in formation. They find Bakugo on the other side with his palms already sweating and his grin already spreading, and absolutely nothing in his expression that looks like someone who was placed here by accident. The explosions start. The corridor becomes a kill box. The Western team attempts a flanking maneuver, wide sweep, high mobility, coming over the rubble from an angle that should bypass the main defensive line. Yao Yorozu's generated obstacles slow them. Kirishima and Sato hold the bottleneck. Jiro's earphone jacks feed sonic pulses into the rubble that make footing treacherous. The team fights for every meter. The northern team commits to their approach. 3 heroes moving through the corridor that Uraraka watches from above. They enter the zero-gravity zone and find themselves lifting, their feet leaving the ground, their movement authority dissolving as the absence of weight makes every step an impossible negotiation with physics. Uraraka touches debris with her fingertips and sends it spinning toward them. Lightweight obstacles that become projectiles in zero gravity, each one requiring attention and effort to deflect. Izuku stands at the center of the defensive zone. He watches all 3 engagements through the sand, tendrils of it distributed across the terrain, threaded through rubble and over rooftops, a nervous system made of earth that feeds him information about every movement in every direction simultaneously. His eyes move between nothing visible. His lips do not move. The muttering that characterized his first weeks at UA is gone, replaced by the deep water focus of someone whose mind is operating at full capacity for the first time since birth. The commission evaluators in their glass booth above the exercise zone watch their screens. They are looking for destabilization. They are looking for the beast, for the partial transformation, the aura, the loss of control that the briefing files promise will emerge under sufficient pressure. They watch the sand moving through the terrain with growing confusion because what they expected was chaos, and what they are receiving is coordination. 7 minutes in, the Western Pro team breaks through the bottleneck. They disable Kirishima with a combined restraint technique and push past Sato's guard. They sprint for the central zone. 3 experienced heroes running at full speed toward what they believe is an exposed center. The sand rises from the ground in front of them like a wall growing from nothing. It is 6 meters tall. It spans the full width of the approach corridor. It is dense enough that the lead hero, an impact quirk user whose entire career is built on breaking through barriers, hits it with a running strike at full power, and his fist sinks 4 inches into the surface and stops. The wall gives nothing else. The sand around his embedded fist tightens. His hand is held. From behind the wall, more sand flows, over the top, around the edges, filling the corridor behind the 3 heroes, so that the path they took to arrive here no longer exists. They stand in a box made of compressed earth, open only at the top, with no angles of attack that lead anywhere except more sand. Izuku walks to the top of the wall. He looks down at the 3 trapped heroes with the same even gaze he gives everything. "Stay," he says. They stay. They have no alternative. The sand holds them with absolute certainty, and they waste 4 minutes of the exercise's remaining time trying to break free before accepting that the material surrounding them is denser than anything their quirks can displace. The Eastern team falls next. Bakugo's explosions drive them backward through the gap in the ice wall, and the gap closes behind them. Todoroki sealing it with a second wave of ice the moment the last hero clears the threshold. They are outside the perimeter again, having gained nothing and expended significant energy. The Northern team, disoriented by zero gravity, pelted with debris, their coordination disrupted by an environment that punishes ground-based combat training, withdraws. They regroup outside the perimeter and attempt a second approach from a different angle, but the sand has already filled the alternate routes. Every path into the central zone that Izuku has access to is closed. The terrain itself has become hostile to the attacking force, the sand woven into the rubble at structural points, ready to reshape the environment at a thought's command. 23 minutes. The exercise clock runs. The 3 pro hero teams regroup, reassess, attempt 4 more coordinated pushes. Each push finds a new configuration of the defense. Class 1A members rotating positions based on information Izuku feeds through Ida's communication relay. The formation adapting to each attempt with the responsiveness of something that has already predicted the adjustment and prepared for it. At 30 minutes, the buzzer sounds. The exercise ends. The 3 pro hero teams have achieved 0 complete breaches. The central zone is intact. Class 1A's formation holds. The commission evaluators sit in their glass booth with expressions that tell a story of complete failure. Their story, the one they were writing about, an unstable weapon that would crack under pressure and give them the footage they needed. The footage they have instead shows a first-year class operating with professional level coordination under the guidance of a student who never raised his voice, never lost control, never gave the beast a single inch of surface expression. The sand moved with intent. The boy moved with authority. The combination produced a result that the evaluators have 0 framework to spin into justification for containment. In the staging area, as Class 1A reassembles and the pro hero teams file debriefing reports that will read like confessions of insufficient preparation, the students of the hero course look at their classmate with new eyes. Izuku stands at the edge of the group, still separate, still maintaining the radius that 15 years of involuntary isolation have made habitual. But the quality of the distance has changed. It is the distance of a person who chooses solitude because it fits rather than the distance of a person who has been denied everything else. Kirishima walks up to him. The red-haired boy has a bruise forming on his jaw from the Western team's engagement and a grin that could light a city block. "Dude," Kirishima says. Then he stops because the word feels insufficient. He extends his fist, a gesture that is reflexive for him, the universal sign of respect in the language of his body. His hardened knuckles hang in the air between them. Izuku looks at the fist. He looks at it for 3 full seconds with an expression that suggests he is parsing an unfamiliar alphabet. Then he lifts his own hand, unhardened, pale, the fingers that have commanded sand burials and sand coffins and the death of things far stronger than a friendly gesture, and touches his knuckles to Kirishima's. The contact lasts half a second. It is enough for Kirishima's grin to reach a new maximum and for the other students in proximity to feel something shift in the classroom's social architecture. Todoroki approaches from the ice wall's direction, frost still visible on his right arm. He stops at a distance that respects Izuku's space but communicates intent. His mismatched eyes hold steady. "You knew they would try the gap," Todoroki says. It is an observation rather than a question. "I knew they would try the thing that looked like a mistake," Izuku answers. A beat passes. Todoroki's jaw works once, the micro-expression of someone preparing to say something that costs effort. "My father builds things to break too," Todoroki says. He calls it training. Izuku's turquoise eyes meet Todoroki's mismatched ones. The exchange lasts 2 seconds. Nothing else is spoken. Nothing else needs to be. 2 boys built by their fathers for purposes their fathers chose, standing in the aftermath of proving they are more than what they were built for. Uraraka finds Izuku as the class moves back toward the dormitory. She falls into step beside him, 3 feet of distance, just outside the sand's passive alert radius. She has been doing this since the first week of term, walking near him, greeting him, existing in his orbit with a consistency that the sand has learned to recognize as non-threat, and therefore allows without raising its defenses. "You put everyone exactly where they needed to be," she says. Her voice carries admiration that she does not attempt to hide. "How did you know?" Izuku walks. His eyes face forward. The gourd on his back shifts with his gait, a weight he has carried so long it is indistinguishable from his body's natural balance. "I watch," he says. 2 words. Flat in delivery, enormous in implication, because watching for Izuku Midoriya means months of silent observation from the back corner of a classroom, means cataloging every quirk activation pattern and movement tendency and emotional trigger in the 20 people surrounding him. It means the same attention that kept him alive in containment, the hypervigilance of someone who learned to read every room, because every room contained potential threat, repurposed into something constructive. Something that builds rather than destroys. Uraraka smiles. It is the same smile she has given him since day one, warm, unfiltered, present. She has extended it into the void of his isolation 100 times and received nothing back. But today, Izuku's head turns 2 degrees toward her as they walk. His eyes find hers for 1 second, 1 full second of direct visual contact, voluntary, initiated by him, held with intention. Then he looks forward again. His pace does not change. His expression does not shift. But Uraraka's heart hammers in her chest because she has been sitting outside a locked door for months, and that 1 second was the sound of the bolt turning. The weeks that follow the joint training exercise carry a different frequency. Izuku Midoriya still sits in the back corner. He still carries the gourd. He still speaks monosyllables and maintains his radius and communes with the thing in his skull during the hours when the other students are laughing and eating and being 15 in all the ways he has never been allowed to be. But the shape of him in the classroom has changed. The other students, who spent the first term treating his presence like an environmental hazard, now glance toward the back corner with a different expression. Where there was fear, something else has moved in. Where there was avoidance, something approaching orbit has begun. They ask him things. Small things at first, tactical questions during training exercises, observations about quirk applications, the kind of low-stakes interactions that test the boundary without crossing it. The sand stays flat. Izuku's answers remain short, but they come. 1 word at a time, in a voice that could still fill stadiums with screaming if the beast demanded it, and the students of Class 1A learn to read a new language. The language of a person who has never had peers before and is trying, in his own impossible way, to figure out what the word means. Then, Shigaraki Tomura returns to the story, and everything accelerates. The attack comes on a Thursday afternoon, 12 blocks southeast of UA's campus, a residential district, densely populated, the kind of area where families with children fill the sidewalks after school lets out. The coordination is precise. 12 simultaneous quirk incidents spread across the district in a pattern designed for one purpose: to create more fires than the hero agencies can extinguish at once. They are the kind of incidents that kill civilians if the response time exceeds 3 minutes. Collapsing buildings. Energy discharges into crowded intersections. Villains with destruction. Quirks targeting infrastructure at load-bearing points. The hero agencies scramble. Pro-heroes deploy to every incident point. The response is fast, but the distribution is wide and the math is ruthless. 12 points of simultaneous crisis, 6 available response teams, every team spread too thin to fully resolve their assigned situation before casualties compound. Class 1A is in the dormitory when the news breaks. The screens in the common room fill with footage. Smoke rising from 6 different locations visible on the skyline, emergency broadcasts, the mechanical voice of the disaster response system issuing evacuation orders. The students cluster around the screens with faces that carry the specific tension of people trained to respond who have been told to stay. Izuku is in his room. The sand told him about the attack before the broadcast started. The beast's awareness extends through the earth itself when Izuku allows it, and the vibrations of 12 simultaneous detonations traveled through the city's substrate like a message addressed to him personally. He felt the pattern. He read the intent. This is bait. The distribution is designed to pull hero resources to maximum extension, creating a gap in coverage that has only one purpose: to draw out a specific target. Him. The League of Villains learned from the USJ. They learned from the sports festival footage. They know what Izuku can do, and they know what triggers his decision to move. Civilian danger is the mechanism. The hero in the making, newly woken, who saved the stadium from himself and chose to stay at a school and fight for people rather than against them. If you put enough civilians in danger across enough space, the boy with the sand will come. Izuku knows it is a trap. He reads the design the way he read the joint training exercise. The shapes of intent visible in the arrangement of threat. He stands in his room with his hand on the gourd and his turquoise eyes fixed on the window where smoke is visible against the afternoon sky, and he makes a decision. He goes. He goes through the window, 3rd floor, the sand catching him in a wave that carries his body to street level in a single flowing descent. He goes because the trap is obvious, and the civilians are real, and the boy who sat in a windowless room for 9 years talking to a monster will not sit in another room while people die within range of his power. This is what All Might's arms gave him. This is what 2 nights of sleep and a fist bump and a girl's consistent smile built inside the empty space where purpose used to be absent. A reason. The sand carries him through the streets faster than a sprint. A flowing platform beneath his feet that reads the ground ahead and accelerates through the path of least resistance. He reaches the first incident point in 90 seconds. A building, 6 stories, residential. The ground floor collapsed by a detonation that took the load-bearing wall. The upper floors are buckling inward. People are visible in windows on the 4th and 5th floors. Families, children, the faces of people who have 30 seconds before structural failure turns their home into a grave. The sand flows into the building's bones. It fills the spaces where the ground floor wall used to be, packing into the gap, compressing, hardening into a temporary load-bearing structure that takes the weight of the upper floors and holds. The buckling stops. The building stabilizes. The people in the windows are screaming and the sound reaches Izuku's ears, but it is the sound of alive people, and the sand holds and they will walk out of that building he moves. Next point. A bridge. The support pillars cracked by a villain with a vibration quirk. The span sagging, cars and pedestrians trapped on the listing surface. Sand flows beneath the bridge like a second span, wrapping the damaged pillars, reinforcing them from below, stabilizing the structure, while the people on top scramble towards solid ground. Next. 12 points of crisis, and Izuku splits his sand between them. Streams of living earth racing through the streets and alleys and underground passages of the district, finding each incident point, stabilizing each situation long enough for evacuation or for the stretched hero teams to catch up. The citizens of the district, running screaming, trying to find safety, watch sand move through their streets like rivers with purpose. They see it flowing past them and feel the weight of it and smell the copper and earth scent of it. And they are frightened for approximately 3 seconds before they realize what it is doing. It is wrapping the cracking walls. It is bracing the falling structures. It is forming barriers between them and the explosion points. It is protecting them. A woman with a child in her arms stands on a sidewalk as a stream of sand passes her at speed, flowing toward a burning building 2 blocks east. The child, 4 years old maybe, round face, tear tracks, points at the sand with one hand. "Mama," the child says. The ground is helping. The woman tightens her hold and watches the sand disappear around the corner, and she believes her child because the evidence is everywhere. In the reinforced walls, in the stabilized bridge, in the barriers that stand between the fires and the people who live here. Izuku reaches the 10th incident point, and the sand tells him something has changed. A presence. Isolated. Patient. Positioned in a side street off the district's central avenue. A presence that is standing still while everything around it moves and burns. The kind of stillness that belongs to someone waiting. Shigaraki Tomura steps out of the shadows of the side street. He is different from the USJ. The twitching is still present. The forefinger scratch at his neck. The posture that carries instability in its lean and its angles. But his eyes are steadier. His body language is more compact. The months between the USJ and this moment have done something to him. Owned an edge. Compressed a fury. Focused a hatred into something that moves with purpose rather than impulse. "There you are," Shigaraki says. His voice carries the scratchy, peeling quality of old paint. "I knew you'd come." The hero complex kicked in right on schedule. His head tilts. His red eyes find Izuku's turquoise ones across the width of the street. "You broke my toy at the USJ. Do you remember?" Izuku stands at the entrance to the street. His sand has been working across the district for 4 minutes. His focus split between 12 stabilization points and the constant demands of structural support and civilian protection. He is extended. This is what Shigaraki planned. Get the sand distributed across maximum range, thin the coverage around the boy himself, then approach when the shield is at minimum density. "I remember you ran," Izuku says. Shigaraki's mouth splits into something that occupies the space between a smile and a wound. "I learned from that. Running taught me things. Losing taught me things." His hands come up, both of them, 5 fingers extended on each, the full set of decay weapons that end anything they contact. "I learned that your sand is the wall between you and everyone else. The wall that keeps you alive. The wall that needs to go before anything else can happen." He moves. Shigaraki's speed is enhanced, something new, something gained in the months between encounters. He closes the distance between them faster than the USJ version could have managed, his body low and direct and his right hand reaching for the sand that begins to form between him and Izuku's body. 4 fingers land on the sand shield. The decay begins immediately. Grains dissolve, breaking apart at the molecular level, collapsing from solid matter into dust that falls away from the shield's surface like dead skin. The affected area spreads from the contact point outward in a growing circle of dissolution. The shield is dying where Shigaraki touches it. His 5th finger reaches. The thumb, the last point of contact needed for full 5-finger activation. Full decay. Total dissolution of whatever the hand holds. Izuku's eyes shift. The turquoise deepens. The pupils contract and then open wide, the physiological sign of the beast rising. But this is different from the sports festival. At the sports festival, the beast rose in desperation and panic, and in the overwhelming pressure of a boy's emotional system reaching total failure. Here, in this street, with civilian lives stabilized across 12 points, and the sand distributed at maximum range, and a villain's decaying hand 2 centimeters from full contact, the beast rises with alignment. It rises because the boy tells it to. The partnership has changed. The weapon and the wielder have found the same direction. The ground beneath Shigaraki vanishes. The street itself, asphalt, sublayer, compressed earth beneath, transitions from solid to liquid in an instant. The sand that constitutes the ground for 2 meters around Shigaraki's feet answers Izuku's command and releases its structural coherence. Shigaraki drops. His balance breaks. His reaching thumb misses the sand shield by the width of 2 fingers as his body tilts backward into the dissolving ground, sand coffin, both of Shigaraki's wrists. Simultaneously, the sand erupts from below, from the liquefied ground, from the earth that Izuku has been touching with his awareness for months of proximity to the city's substrate. It wraps both forearms in compressed shells that seal every finger in place, cover every knuckle, bury every contact point that Shigaraki's quirk requires for activation. His hands, the weapons that can end anything they touch, become locked inside tombs of earth so dense that the decay activated by the 4-finger contact cannot spread faster than the sand replenishes itself. Shigaraki looks up from his compromised position, off balance, arms pinned, the sand climbing past his elbows. His red eyes find Izuku standing above him with the shield repairing itself, and the beast looking out through turquoise irises with the cold interest of a predator that has already made its decision. "You ran at the USJ," Izuku says. His voice is the lowest it has been in any fight, barely above a whisper, carrying the weight of something final being delivered at a volume that forces the recipient to listen. "You should have kept running." Shigaraki's mouth opens. Whatever words he intended to speak, whatever clever assessment, whatever defiant declaration, whatever desperate gambit he had planned for this eventuality, the sand fills the space first. It rises past his elbows, it takes his shoulders, it covers his chest and his neck and wraps the lower half of his face so that his red eyes are the last things visible above the line of living earth. Those eyes are wide. Those eyes carry something they did not carry at the USJ. The recognition of an ending arriving with total certainty and zero possibility of escape. At the USJ, Shigaraki saw a weapon that frightened him. Here in this street, he sees a person who has decided, and the difference between those two things is the difference between a storm you can flee and a sentence that has already been written. Izuku raises his hand. The execution posture, fist curled, fingers ready to close. Sand burial. The compression is total. The sound it produces fills the side street with a noise that carries across the entire district, a thunderous, final, slamming impact of millions of grains tightening simultaneously around a human body until the body is no longer a body. The sand holds its compressed form for 3 seconds, a sphere of density that hangs in the air above the street with Izuku's raised fist as its anchor. Then it releases. The sand falls away. What remains falls with it, and what remains is less than a shape. The sand returns to Izuku's gourd. It flows back from the 12 stabilization points across the district, each building now braced by the hero teams who arrived during the minutes Izuku bought them, each crisis point resolved or managed, the civilians safe. The streams of sand converge on the boy in the side street, repacking into the gourd on his back with the sound of a desert inhaling. Izuku lowers his fist. His face carries nothing readable, the same flat expression he wears to every meal and every class and every moment that exists between fights. He is present. He is steady. The beast settles in his skull with the satisfaction of something that has been pointed at a target and allowed to hit it. And the boy and the monster are in agreement for the first time in 15 years of shared existence. Pro heroes arrive in the minutes that follow. They find the district stabilized, the civilian casualties minimal, the 12 incident points resolved. They find evidence of League of Villains activity throughout the area. Low-tier muscle, scattered, most of them apprehended by responding hero teams during the initial engagement. They find one more thing. In a side street off the central avenue, they find a circle of compressed earth on the ground and evidence of a fight, and the remains of something that used to be a person and a boy standing at the street's entrance with his gourd on his back, his turquoise eyes looking at nothing in particular. The hero who arrives first, a veteran, 20 years active, experienced enough to read a scene and understand what it tells him, looks at the remains. He looks at the boy. He looks at the gourd. "Midoriya," the hero says. His voice is even but careful. "Was this..." "Shigaraki Tomura," Izuku says. "He was here for me." The hero processes this. He processes it with the speed of a professional who has been reading situation reports about the League of Villains for 2 years, and who suddenly understands that the most wanted villain in the country is no longer a current threat. He's done. One word. Final as a closed door. Izuku turns away from the street and walks toward the main avenue, where the sounds of recovery operations fill the air. Sirens, voices, the machinery of a city pulling itself back together after someone tried to tear it apart. The sand in his gourd is heavy with what it took today. It moves with a certainty it has never carried before. The certainty of an instrument that has been fully calibrated to its user's hand. Behind him, the veteran hero stands in the side street and stares at what used to be the League of Villains leader and feels something that he will describe later to his colleagues in private, as the realization that the next generation has already surpassed the point where the current one can evaluate it. The news of Shigaraki's death reaches the world within hours. The media processes it in waves. First confirmation, then speculation, then the slow assembly of the full picture. 12 simultaneous attacks, a student responding outside authorization, an encounter in a side street, an outcome that has no ambiguity. The League of Villains is decapitated. The most wanted villain in the country is gone. The person responsible is a first-year UA student. Hisashi Midoriya watches the coverage in his office and makes 3 phone calls in rapid succession. The first is to his legal team. The second is to his commission contacts. The third is to a number that exists on no public record, a line that connects to someone whose interest in quirk-based power exceeds anything that electoral politics can contain. All for One takes the call with the same patience he extends to all things that serve his long-term design. Hisashi's voice on the line carries a new frequency. The frequency of a man who is running out of plays and knows it, and is willing to make deals he would have refused a month ago. The asset is out of my reach, Hisashi says. All Might has established himself as primary influence. The commission approach failed. The containment approach failed. I need an escalation option. All for One's voice, old, ruined, carrying the texture of someone who has been breathing longer than anyone alive, asks what Hisashi is willing to offer in exchange. Whatever you need, Hisashi says. Access to the facility, documentation, the original research from the quirk's manifestation. Everything. A pause on the line. All for One has been interested in the sand quirk since the day its classification crossed his intelligence network, a parasitic mutation with autonomous defense, infinite density scaling, and a bound entity that has existed longer than the boy carrying it. The potential applications are enormous. The potential counters are limited. And now the father, the man who made the weapon, is handing over the blueprints. Arrange a meeting, All for One says. Bring the boy to me. The trap is elegant in its design. All for One does not arrange violence. He arranges revelation. He takes the documentation that Hisashi provides, 9 years of handler reports, assessment data, containment protocols, everything that was done to Izuku Midoriya in every facility he was held in, and he arranges for it to reach the boy. The delivery is indirect. A data packet that appears in the digital space between UAA's internal network and an external source, flagged with enough authenticity markers to pass Izuku's suspicion threshold while still carrying the fingerprint of someone who wants it found. Izuku finds the files at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. He is awake. The beast still prevents full sleep cycles. The best nights still average 3 hours in total, sitting on the floor of his dorm room with the gourd breathing against his back and the blue light of a tablet illuminating the kanji on his forehead. The data packet arrived 30 minutes ago. He has been staring at the notification without opening it, because Izuku Midoriya has lived in a world designed by people who leave traps long enough to recognize the shape of one. He opens it anyway. He opens it because the sender line carries a reference number that matches Hisashi's internal classification system, a system Izuku watched being used on him for 9 years. And whatever the trap is, whatever waits inside it, the information it offers is something Izuku has never had access to and has always deserved. The files load, page after page after page. Handler reports with his name redacted to a project number. Assessment data measuring his quirk's growth against projected curves. Containment protocols revised after every incident where the sand exceeded its previous parameters. Medical data, his sleep patterns, his neural scans, the beast's activity levels mapped across years of continuous monitoring. Notes from the staff. Observations made by people paid to watch a boy in a windowless room and record what they saw without engaging with who they were watching. One report, dated when Izuku was 8, contains the sentence, "Subject vocalized mother 17 times during observation period, consistent with parasitic entity communication. Recommend continued isolation to prevent anthropomorphization of the bond." Another, dated when he was 11, "Subject's sand range has exceeded facility parameters for the 3rd time this quarter. Recommend transfer to the Hokkaido installation. Father has approved budget for reinforced containment at the new site." Another, dated when he was 13, Handler 7 reported that subject spoke to her directly during afternoon assessment. Subject asked if she liked her job. Handler 7 has been reassigned per standard protocol. Father reminded staff that engagement with the asset beyond functional parameters is a contractual violation. Izuku reads every page. His face carries nothing. His turquoise eyes move through the documents at an even pace, the same speed for the containment protocols as for the medical data, as for the staff notes that describe his childhood like an equipment maintenance log. The sand in the gourd shifts in slow patterns, responding to his emotional state, reading the internal weather that his face refuses to display. When the last page is read, Izuku sets the tablet on the floor. He sits in the blue-lit silence of his room. The beast makes a sound in his skull, low, rumbling, carrying the same tone it carried on the night Chiyo died. The sound of recognition. The sound of something ancient and hungry, seeing clearly what the boy's father did, and filing it in the same category as every other betrayal that led to 6-year-old hands clenching and sand compressing and love being carved into skin because there was nobody alive left to give it. Izuku places his hand on the gourd. The sand presses back against his palm from inside. "Mother," he says. The word is barely a breath. The room is full of night and blue tablet light and the weight of a decade of documentation that describes a child being kept like something in a cage. "Are you watching?" The beast rumbles its answer. It is always watching. It has been watching since before birth, since before the body it inhabits was born, since before the world it lives in carried its current shape. It watches now. It watches the boy place his hand flat on the floor and rise to his feet with a movement that carries the same terrible steadiness as the sand preparing to bury. Izuku picks up his gourd. He adjusts the strap across his chest. He walks to the door of his room and opens it and steps into the hallway of the dormitory at 3 a.m. with the sand trailing behind him like a sentence that has already finished writing itself. He is going to find his father. The facility sits 40 kilometers outside Musutafu, a government installation that appears on no public map and carries a classification level prevents even most commission officials from knowing its purpose. It is one of 3 facilities that Hisashi used for Izuku's containment during the 9 years between the night Chiyo died and the day the UA acceptance letter arrived. This one, the Hokkaido installation referenced in the transfer report, has been repurposed since Izuku's departure. Hisashi uses it now as a staging ground for operations that require distance from public attention. The kind of operations that involve classified phone lines and men in government badges and conversations about assets and retrieval. Izuku reaches the facility at 4:30 a.m. The sand carried him, a flowing wave beneath his feet that covered 40 kilometers in less than an hour, reading the earth ahead and finding the fastest path through terrain that means nothing to something that can reshape the ground. He stands at the facility's outer perimeter, a fence line topped with sensors, surrounded by cleared ground designed to detect approach from any direction. The sensors register the sand 3 seconds before Izuku disables them. The sand flows into the sensor housings and fills them, blocking lenses, severing connections, turning each monitoring device into a sand-filled shell that reports nothing to the security team inside. The fence line parts as sand dissolves the base of 4 consecutive posts, dropping a section of barrier flat to the ground. Izuku walks through the gap. The facility looms ahead, a squat concrete structure, multiple levels, the kind of building that communicates its purpose through its featurelessness. It looks like the rooms Izuku grew up in. It carries the same frequency, the hum of containment, the resonance of walls that were built to keep something in rather than something out, He is halfway across the cleared ground when the first quirk activation hits him. The blast comes from above, a concentrated beam of thermal energy that strikes the sand shield around Izuku's body and superheats the outer layer to glass in a quarter second. The glass forms and cracks and falls away in fragments that catch the Pradon light. A second blast follows from the east, lightning this time, a branching discharge that hits the sand and disrupts the beast's signal across a localized field, causing a section of the shield to momentarily lose cohesion. All for One stands on the facility's roof. He is massive in presence, if unremarkable in form, a figure silhouetted against the Pradon sky, his face obscured by a helmet that covers the damage of decades of power accumulation and loss. His body carries the posture of someone who has been the most powerful person in any room for longer than most people have been alive. Multiple quirks activate simultaneously around him, the air shimmering with thermal distortion, electricity arcing between his fingers, gravitational anomalies bending the light around his shoulders. Midoriya Izuku, All for One says. His voice is amplified, carrying a quirk-enhanced resonance that fills the cleared ground between them. Your father told me you would come. He was very confident about the timing. Izuku's turquoise eyes find the figure on the roof. The beast surges in his skull, a response to the presence it detects, the accumulated quirk energy radiating from the man above. The sand reforms around the disrupted section of the shield, density increasing, the outer layer hardening past the vitrification threshold, so that the next thermal blast produces glass that the sand simply absorbs into its structure rather than shedding. You have something of mine, All for One continues. His tone carries the patience of someone explaining a simple transaction. Or rather, you are something of mine. Do you know the history of your quirk, boy? Do you know where the beast in your sand came from? The bloodline it follows. He tilts his head, the gesture visible even through the helmet's profile. Your mother's family held it for generations. I was the one who ensured it reached you. I was the one who arranged for Hisashi to have access to the lineage that produced you. You are, in a very real sense, something I designed. The sand's response is Izuku's response. It flows outward from his body in a wave that covers the cleared ground between the perimeter fence and the facility wall, a spreading tide that transforms the open space into territory that belongs to him. The earth beneath the pavement answers the same way it answered it at the entrance exam at this festival, the sports festival, in the street where Shigaraki died. Solid becomes sand. The ground converts. The facility's foundation shakes as the substrate beneath it begins to answer a new authority. I am something I designed, Izuku says. The words carry across the distance with the flatness of a blade. What you arranged, what my father arranged, what was done to me in rooms like the one behind you, those things produced the weapon you expected. The weapon killed everyone you sent it. The weapon broke everything you aimed it at. And the weapon decided for itself what it is. He touches the ground with 2 fingers. It decided to kill you. All for One fires everything. The thermal quirks activate at maximum output, a focused cone of heat that exceeds 2,000 degrees, aimed at the sand wave flowing toward the facility. The outer layer of sand vitrifies. The glass holds for 1 second before the pressure of the sand behind it shatters the glass into powder that becomes new ammunition for the wave. The lightning quirk arcs in continuous discharge, branching patterns that hit the sand and try to scatter the beast's signal across the grains. The sand keeps coming. The disruption fields cause localized breaks in coherence that last fractions of seconds before the beast's full attention reasserts control. All for One fires a kinetic quirk, an air cannon of compressed force that hits the approaching wall and punches a hole through it 20 meters wide. The hole fills in 4 seconds. The wall keeps advancing. All for One launches himself from the roof, airborne, multiple quirks activating in concert to carry his body above the rising sand. He fires downward, thermal, kinetic, electrical, gravitational, a barrage that turns the air between him and the ground into a cascade of destructive energy. The sand takes every impact. It loses volume, sections burned to glass, scattered by kinetics, disrupted by lightning. It loses and regains and loses and regains in a cycle that matches the rhythm of the assault. Izuku stands in the center of his territory. He has pulled sand from the earth for 300 meters in every direction. The facility's foundation, the ground beneath the fence line, the substrate of the access road, and the cleared perimeter. The volume available to him exceeds anything he has commanded before. And yet, All for One's multi-quirk barrage is reducing it faster than the conversion can replenish it. This is the fight the beast was born for. This is the ceiling, the actual ceiling, the person behind every villain who ever came before, the architect of the system that created Shigaraki and the Nomu and the League and everything that followed from the Night and Flown. All for One decided the world owed him ownership. He is powerful in a way that transcends individual quirks. The accumulated theft of a century of abilities, wielded with the expertise of someone who has been doing this since before Izuku's grandparents were born. For the first 40 seconds, All for One's barrage wins the exchange. The sand loses volume. The conversion rate from earth to usable material falls behind the destruction rate. The shield around Izuku thins. A thermal blast reaches his skin, the heat singing the fabric of his uniform before the sand fills the gap. A kinetic round nearly staggers him. The force transmitted through the thinning shield enough to push his feet backward 1 inch. Then Izuku makes the decision that separates Part 2 from Part 1. He pulls the sand back, all of it. Every grain that has been fighting the defensive exchange, every particle that has been absorbing blasts and reforming and absorbing and reforming in a losing battle of attrition. He pulls it to his core. The shield contracts from a wide area coverage into a tight orbit around his body. Dense, concentrated, a spinning mass of compressed earth that contains everything the beast has been managing across the 300-meter radius, now condensed into a sphere 2 meters in diameter, around a 15-year-old boy who has stopped defending and started deciding. The decision is, stop blocking, start burying. The sand erupts upward. A column, a single, massive, focused column of compressed earth that rises from the ground at Izuku's feet, with a velocity that turns the air around it into vacuum. It does not spread wide. It does not form a wall or a wave or a shield. It is targeted. It is aimed. It carries the full mass of everything Izuku has converted in the last 90 seconds. Hundreds of tons of transformed earth accelerated into a single direction with the beast's full energy behind every grain. The column hits All for One at the apex of his flight arc. The thermal quirks fire into it. The outer layer turns to glass. The glass becomes the tip of the column, a blade of superheated silica backed by the unstoppable weight of compressed sand. The kinetic quirks fire. The column absorbs the force and adds it to its own momentum. The lightning arcs into the sand, and the beast's signal is so concentrated in this single mass that the disruption has no effect, like trying to disrupt a river by throwing a pebble into it. The column wraps All for One, sand coffin. Applied to a man carrying 100 stolen quirks and a century of accumulated power and the arrogance of someone who has never encountered a force he could not steal or break. The sand takes him from every direction, climbing the quirk-shielded body, finding gaps between active defenses, filling the spaces that the thermal and kinetic and electrical barriers cannot cover simultaneously. It wraps his legs. It takes his arms. It covers his torso in a compression that treats his multi-quirk barriers the way ocean depth treats submarine hulls, with patient, omnidirectional, ever-increasing pressure. All for One fires every quirk at once. The release is enormous, a sphere of combined energy that expands outward from his body in every direction. Thermal and kinetic and electrical and gravitational all discharging simultaneously in a last resort defense designed to obliterate everything within 10 meters. The sand takes it. The outer layer burns. The middle layer absorbs the kinetic force. The inner layer holds. The compression does not stop. The pressure does not decrease. The sand has no ceiling. The beast has been contained for 15 years, and its patience has no limit, and its hunger has no floor. And when the boy who carries it decides that something ends, the ending is absolute. I exist to kill, Izuku says. The words are spoken to himself, to the beast, to the memory of every night in every room where the sand was all he had and the sand was enough. I fight only for myself. His fist clenches. Sand burial. The column compresses. That the sound fills the pre-dawn air with a noise that carries for kilometers. A deep, grinding, tectonic sound that belongs to mountains forming rather than fights ending. Every quirk All for One carries fires in its death throes. The stolen abilities, discharging as the bodies that house them, are reduced past functionality. Light and heat and force bloom inside the compressed sand like fireworks sealed in a box. The sand holds them all. The sand holds everything. The sand has always held everything. When the column opens, when the compression releases and the sand falls away in a cascade that coats the facility's cleared ground in a layer of dust, there is nothing left that could be called a person. There are fragments of the helmet. There are traces of energy dissipating into the morning air. There is the absence of a presence that has shaped the underworld of this country for a century. All for One is gone. Izuku stands in the aftermath. His gourd is empty, every grain committed to the attack. His body is exposed to the morning air without any defensive layer, and he does not move to restore it. The beast is satisfied in his skull, a low, rolling sound that carries the tone of completion, of a hunt finished, of a predator fed, but the facility still stands. And inside it, Izuku can feel through the earth that his sand has been touching since he arrived, is a heartbeat. A single heartbeat on the second floor in a room that was once a monitoring station for a boy in a containment cell. Hisashi Midoriya is inside. Izuku calls the sand back. It flows from the ground, from the facility's outer walls, from the scattered areas where the fight distributed it. It returns to the gourd in a stream that takes 30 seconds to complete. The gourd fills. The strap settles on Izuku's chest. The weight returns to his back. He walks into the facility. The interior is what Izuku expected. Corridors and monitoring rooms and the kind of sterile, featureless architecture that tells you its purpose through what it refuses to provide. Windows that are too small, doors that are too thick, surfaces that are too smooth, too clean, too free of anything that might make the space feel like it was designed for people rather than for containing them. Izuku walks through these halls the way he walked through them as a child, in silence, at his own pace, with the sand keeping time against his spine. He finds the room on the second floor. The door is open, a standard office door, unreinforced, the kind that exists in the administrative section rather than the containment wing. The room beyond it holds a desk, a chair, a wall of monitors that display camera feeds from the facility's exterior. The monitors show the aftermath of the fight, the destroyed ground, the scattered debris, the absence of All for One. Hisashi sits in the chair. He is a tall man, well-dressed, even in a secured facility at 5 in the morning. The kind of person whose appearance is a practiced shield against vulnerability, whose every external detail communicates control and status and belonging. His face is Izuku's face 25 years from now. The same bone structure, the same jaw, the same eyes, except without the turquoise, without the rings, without the scar that declares in permanent brushstrokes what his son decided about love when he was 6 years old. Hisashi's face carries intelligence and composure and the absolute absence of anything that could be called warmth. He looks at his son in the doorway. He looks at the gourd, the sand, the kanji, the turquoise eyes that are fixed on him with an intensity that does not waver. "You killed him," Hisashi says. His voice is even, assessing. The voice of a man watching an experiment produce results that are interesting rather than catastrophic, as if the death of All for One is a data point rather than a reckoning. "I didn't think you could." His file listed over 100 active quirks. Izuku stands in the door. His body fills the frame, taller than the last time Hisashi saw him in person, leaner, the sand-colored clothing hanging on a frame that has grown into its power rather than being consumed by it. The silence he offers in response to Hisashi's assessment fills the room like rising water. Hisashi adjusts in his chair. His hands rest on the desk, palms down, fingers spread, the posture of a man who is aware that he has no leverage and is attempting to maintain the appearance of it through body language alone. "The situation has changed," Hisashi says. "All for One is gone. The commission is in restructuring. The political landscape that necessitated your containment no longer exists in the same configuration. I can facilitate your transition to..." "Stop." One word. Izuku's voice fills the room the way the sand fills spaces, completely, from every direction, leaving nothing uncovered. Hisashi's mouth closes. Izuku walks into the room. His footsteps on the tile floor are the only sound. The sand in the gourd breathes against his back. He stops 3 meters from the desk, within reach, within the sand's instant range, within the space that his father has occupied for 15 years from a distance and is now forced to share. I read the files, Izuku says, every report, every handler log, every time you signed an approval for another year of containment. Hisashi's face does something small, a tightening at the corners of the eyes, the micro-expression of a man who prepared for confrontation about his methods and is arriving at it now. Those decisions were made in the context of a woman asked me if I liked her company, Izuku says. His voice remains even, but the temperature of it drops with every word. She asked me a question like I was a person. You had her reassigned within the hour. I was 13. I remembered her name for 3 months before the insomnia took it from me. Engagement with the asset beyond. I used to wonder if you would ever say her name like you meant it, Izuku says. His turquoise eyes hold his father's face with the total focus of a weapon that has found its final target. My mother, Inko. She died having me, and you looked at the baby in the doctor's arms and saw a project. You have never said her name like she was a person to you. Hisashi's composure thins. The mask of cost-benefit analysis, the one he wears to every meeting and every phone call and every decision he has made about his son since the boy was born, develops a hairline fracture. Something moves behind it that might be recognition. That might be the first honest expression Izuku has ever seen on his father's face. She was necessary, Hisashi says. The words come out in the tone he uses for everything, even, measured, carrying the cadence of a man explaining a balance sheet, the lineage, the quirk factor. She was the vehicle that produced. You said it like a number. The sentence lands in the room like a blade hitting a surface. Hisashi's mouth closes. His hands on the desk shift, the fingers curling inward, the first physical sign that the composure is failing. Izuku. He uses the name, the actual name. The word that a father is supposed to use for his child, but which Hisashi has spent 15 years replacing with terms like subject and asset and the weapon. It sounds wrong in his mouth. It sounds like a word in a foreign language being read phonetically by someone who does not speak it. You're right, Hisashi says. And here, in this moment, write him with full dimensionality. He is a monster and a coward, and he believes his own logic completely. He believes that what he did was rational, was necessary, was the correct allocation of a resource that arrived in his life through the death of a woman he never loved for reasons he never examined. He looks at his son and sees the confirmation of everything he built and feels something that might be pride. The wrong kind of pride. The pride of an engineer observing a machine that exceeded specifications. The pride that has nothing to do with love and everything to do with ownership. You're right that I never treated her or you as anything beyond variables in an equation. And I am right that the equation produced results that have made you the most powerful individual in this country at 15 years old. Both things are true. Both things. One of those things matters, Izuku says. The other is the reason you're going to die in this room. Hisashi's face changes. The composure fails completely. The man behind the mask is, for one visible second, afraid. Genuinely, openly afraid of his own child, afraid of the thing he built, afraid of the 15 years of consequence that have been approaching him since the night he sent a woman with a blade into a 6-year-old boy's room and watched on a monitor as the sand did what the sand does. Izuku. Wait, the sand flows from the gourd. It pours into the room like a slow tide, covering the floor, climbing the walls, sealing the door, filling the space between father and son with living earth that answers the authority of the boy who carries it. Hisashi pushes back from his desk. His chair rolls into the sand behind him and stops, held in place by grains that have wrapped the wheels and locked them. I'm your father, Hisashi says. The word sounds hollow in his mouth. It sounds like a word he has never earned and is trying to spend for the first time in a moment where its currency has already been revoked. You were the person who owned me, Izuku corrects. His voice does not rise. It does not crack. It carries the even, flat, total certainty of a sentence that has been written for 9 years and is finally being spoken aloud. The person who sent Chio into my room with a blade. The person who watched me kill her and wrote "The project continues" in a report 12 seconds later. You were the architect of everything that happened to me, and you did it because you saw numbers where you should have seen a child. Sand coffin. The sand takes Hisashi the way it takes everything, completely, efficiently, without drama or ceremony. It wraps his body from the floor upward, covering his legs, his torso, his arms that reach toward his son in a gesture that might be supplication and might be defense, and arrives too late to be either. The sand covers his face last, his eyes, the eyes that are Izuku's eyes without the turquoise, without the rings, without the decade of horror reflected in them. Look at his son until the sand seals them. Izuku's fist clenches. Sand burial. The compression is complete. The sound it makes in the confined space of the office is muted compared to the open air. A thick, heavy, final sound that carries nowhere beyond the walls. The monitors on the wall shake. The desk shifts. A coffee cup tips and shatters on the floor beneath the sand layer. When the sand releases, Hisashi Midoriya is gone. The sand returns to the gourd. Grain by grain, it flows back into the container with the patience of water finding its level. The strap settles. The weight sits on Izuku's back. The room is empty, except for furniture and monitors, and the remains of a coffee cup and the boy who just killed his father, and is looking at the place where the man sat with an expression that holds nothing. The cameras can name. He stands in the room for a long time. The monitors cycle their feeds. The morning light grows beyond the small windows. The beast in his skull is very still. The stillness of something that has completed a task and is resting in the aftermath. Then Izuku turns. He walks out of the room, down the corridor, through the facility's entrance, across the destroyed cleared ground, past the collapsed fence line. He walks into the morning with his gourd on his back and his face forward and the kanji on his forehead catching the first rays of dawn. He does not look back at the facility. He will never return to it. The places that held him are done holding, and the person who built those places is done building, and the project that started on the night Izuku was born has, at last and completely, ended. 5 weeks later, the sky catches fire. The power vacuum left by All for One's death fractures the villain underworld into a dozen competing factions, each one scrambling for position, each one burning resources in attempts to claim the space the fallen ceiling left behind. Most of these factions are manageable. Hero agencies contain them through standard operations. The Commission's restructured leadership coordinates responses with increasing effectiveness as the chaos settles into patterns. But one faction, a splinter group with access to resources that predated All for One's organization, makes a decision born from desperation and nihilism rather than strategy. They possess a quirk user whose ability can accelerate mass to extreme velocity, a human railgun, effectively, with a targeting range limited only by the mass they can acquire and the infrastructure they can access to position it. The quirk has been constrained for years by the difficulty of finding objects heavy enough to matter and aiming them with the precision required to hit anything useful. Until now. Because the facility where they've been hiding, a former government research station that All for One's network maintained for high-value asset storage, contains an asteroid fragment. A 12-meter chunk of iron and nickel that was being studied for its unique mineral composition, stored in a reinforced hangar, accessible to anyone with the codes and the desperation to use it, they use it. The acceleration happens in a converted launch bay pointed at 37 degrees above horizontal. The angle required to reach an apex of 400 kilometers before gravity returns the mass to Earth. The target is Musutafu. The villain faction's communique, released 30 seconds after the launch, declares it a statement of intent against the hero society that killed their ceiling. An extinction event for the city that houses UA. The asteroid fragment enters its descent trajectory at 4:47 p.m. on a clear afternoon. Atmospheric entry begins at 4:49. The sky above Musutafu turns orange as friction heats the descending mass to incandescence. The trail it leaves in the upper atmosphere is visible from 60 kilometers in every direction, a line of fire drawn across the blue by something moving too fast for any human response system to intercept. The emergency broadcasts begin. Evacuation orders. Shelter protocols. The mechanical voice of the disaster system repeating instructions that everyone hearing them already knows are insufficient. The mass is too large. The velocity is too high. The impact zone is too central to the population density for evacuation to reach completion before arrival. The math says millions of people will die. Every hero agency in the region activates simultaneously. Teams scramble, plans are drawn. Quirk users with interception capabilities are identified and deployed. The math is done in real time by analysts who keep rechecking their numbers because the numbers keep saying the same thing. There is nothing in the combined hero roster of the greater Musutafu region that can stop a 12-meter iron mass descending at terminal velocity from 400 kilometers of altitude. Izuku Midoriya is standing on the roof of the Class 1A dormitory when the sky changes color. He is up here because the beast likes height, likes the connection to the air, the expanded awareness that comes from elevation, the feeling of the wind carrying information about the world below. He has been coming up here in the afternoons since the joint training exercise, sitting on the roof's edge with his gourd beside him and his eyes on the skyline, and his body learning, slowly, what it feels like to rest in a space that belongs to him. The orange glow appears in the southwest quadrant of the sky. The beast registers it first. A change in pressure, a shift in the upper atmosphere's composition that carries the signature of something massive and hot and approaching at speed. Izuku's head lifts. His turquoise eyes find the streak of fire against the blue, and his brain processes the shape and the angle and the velocity in 2 seconds flat. He stands. The gourd sits at his feet. He looks at it. He looks at the sky. He looks at the city spread below the dormitory roof. The streets, the buildings, the lives moving through them in patterns of ordinary afternoon business. People who are walking to stores and driving home from work and picking up children from school and who do not know yet that something is falling toward them from above. Izuku places the gourd on the roof surface. He crouches. He puts both palms flat against the concrete. The connection begins. It starts at his fingertips. The beast's awareness flowing outward from his skin into the building's structure, into the steel and concrete and rebar that make up the dormitory's bones. Then deeper, through the foundation, into the earth below, into the soil and clay and compressed mineral substrate that has been beneath this city since before the city existed, into the bedrock, into the geological layer of compacted sand and stone that lies 30 meters below the surface and extends in every direction for kilometers. Izuku reaches. He reaches the way a root system reaches, wide, total, finding everything. The beast's signal travels through the earth at the speed of the connection itself, which is the speed of the beast's attention, which has no limit that 15 years of cohabitation have discovered. The awareness finds sand. It finds sand-analogous material. It finds everything that has ever been sand or could become sand or will be sand given sufficient time and sufficient pressure. He asks it to respond. The city shakes. It is a tremor, subtle at first, barely registering on civilian awareness, the kind of vibration that people attribute to truck traffic or construction work or the normal operation of urban infrastructure. Then it intensifies. The shaking becomes visible. Objects on shelves shifting, water in glasses rippling, the surfaces of the world announcing that something beneath them is moving. The first column of sand rises through a park 2 blocks from the dormitory. It punches through the grass and the topsoil and the accumulated matter of decades of urban landscaping, and it climbs. Rises, accelerates upward with a speed that turns the air around it into a scream of displacement. It is the width of a building. It is growing. A second column rises 3 blocks east, a third south, a fourth and fifth and sixth, erupting through streets and parks and the spaces between buildings where the ground is accessible, each one reaching upward with the same impossible velocity, each one carrying hundreds of tons of transformed earth toward a sky that is running out of time. The citizens of Musutafu watch the sand rise around them. They watch it pour from the earth like the world itself is standing up. They feel the vibration of it in their feet and their chests and the resonating cavities of their skulls. And they look up at columns of earth that climb past the rooftops and past the skyline and into the cloud layer above. The columns merge, kilometers above the city, at the altitude where the orange streak is descending toward them. The columns of sand converge into a single mass, a platform of living earth that spans the sky above Musutafu like a hand raised to catch a falling stone. The geometry of it is impossible. The mass of it is inconceivable. The fact that a human quirk is generating it in real time from 40 kilometers of converted bedrock, while a 15-year-old boy kneels on a dormitory roof with his palms flat against the concrete. This is the thing that will be discussed in every hero agency and every government office and every living room in the country for years after this day. The meteorite hits the sand. The impact is visible from space. The orange streak meets the sand cloud, and the collision produces a shockwave that ripples outward through the upper atmosphere in a ring of displaced air. The sound reaches the ground 3 seconds later, a deep, resonant boom that rolls across the city like the voice of something too large for human hearing to contain. The sand compresses at the impact point, millions of tons of transformed earth absorbing the kinetic energy of a 12-meter iron mass traveling at several kilometers per second. The sand holds. It does not hold easily. The meteorite drives into the mass by dozens of meters. The compression zone expands. The heat of the descending mass vitrifies a sphere of sand around it, glass forming and being replaced by new sand flowing in from the edges. The weight of the impact transfers through the sand cloud and the columns that support it and into the earth below, and the city shakes with the force of a planet-scale redistribution of energy. But it holds. Izuku's hands press harder against the roof. His arms shake. His turquoise eyes are shut and his jaw is locked. And the beast in his skull is roaring, a sound of effort rather than hunger. The sound of something ancient applying the full measure of its 15-year bond with a boy who has finally given it a direction worth every grain. The meteorite decelerates. Its velocity drops. The sand wraps it, flowing around the mass as it slows, encasing it in a growing shell that adds resistance from every angle. The orange glow dims as the heat transfers into the sand around it. The descent stops, the sand squeezes. The iron fragment, 12 meters, hundreds of thousands of kilograms, accelerated to extinction event velocity by a quirk that never should have accessed it, breaks apart inside the sand. The compression reduces it from a single mass to fragments, to gravel, to dust. The dust mixes with the sand. It becomes part of the body that holds it. The sand absorbs the meteorite the way it absorbs everything, completely. Finally, with the patience of something that has been here longer than the rock from space, the orange light in the sky goes out. The sand cloud above Musutafu holds for another 10 seconds. An impossible ceiling of transformed earth hanging above the city like a second sky. Then, slowly, it begins to fall. The columns retract. The mass descends in a controlled shower, millions of tons of sand returning to the earth in a gentle, distributed rain that takes 4 full minutes to complete. It falls on the city like weather. It coats every surface, every roof, every car, every sidewalk, every window ledge, in a layer of fine, gold-brown earth. The city turns the color of desert sand, every surface wearing the evidence of what just happened. The citizens of Musutafu stand in the streets as the sand falls around them. They stand in the open, having emerged from shelters and doorways and the frozen poses of people expecting to die. And they watch the sand settle on their shoulders and their hair and the palms of their upraised hands. They are alive. They are alive because the earth rose up between them, and the thing falling from space, and the earth held, and they are standing in the aftermath of their own salvation, wearing it on their skin. A child in the street catches sand in both palms and looks at her mother with eyes that carry the specific light of someone experiencing wonder for the first time. "Mama," the child says. "The ground saved us." A man standing next to a car he will never drive again because the sand has filled the engine compartment through the air intake, looks up at the clearing sky and starts laughing. He does not know why. The laughter just comes, a release, a pressure valve, the sound of survival expressing itself in the only way his body knows how. Across the city, in 100 different locations, the same thing happens. People laugh. People cry. People hold each other in streets covered with desert sand and feel the weight of being alive and knowing why. On the dormitory roof, Izuku lowers his hands from the concrete. He sits back on his heels. His arms hang at his sides. His chest heaves with the effort of the largest deployment of sand in his life, the deepest connection to the earth he has ever made, the fullest expression of the beast's partnership he has ever achieved. Sweat runs down his face. The turquoise of his eyes is luminous, burning with residual energy that takes several seconds to fade. He picks up the gourd. The sand that remains on the roof flows into it, joining the reservoir. The strap goes over his shoulder. The weight settles. He looks at the sky. The orange is gone. The blue returns, clearer than before, empty of everything except the natural movement of clouds. "The sand will not lose," he says. The words are meant for himself and the beast and the sky and the city below him and every person who will hear about this day and understand what happened. They carry the certainty of something proven, a statement that was always true and is now demonstrated past any possible refutation. Far below the dormitory, on a street 3 blocks south, All Might stands with his face turned upward and sand settling on the shoulders of his civilian suit. He has been in contact with Izuku since the sports festival, visiting when he can, sending messages that Izuku sometimes responds to with a single word and sometimes responds to with 2, and once responded to with something that might have been a joke if you squinted hard enough. He has been the person who promised to stay, and he has been staying. And he has been watching the boy he held in a stadium grow into something that makes the promise feel less like charity and more like the privilege of witnessing something extraordinary. He watches the sand fall from the sky with an expression that carries years of heroism and years of pain and years of being the strongest person alive, and on his face there is something that surpasses all of it. There is the joy of a man who chose to believe in a child the world called a monster, and the child just saved the city, and the proof falls from the sky in gold-brown evidence that covers everything it touches. All Might smiles. The real one. The one that costs nothing because it comes from truth. The weeks that follow the meteor event are the most violent of Izuku's life, and counterintuitively, the most purposeful. All for One's destruction and the meteor interception have painted a target on Izuku's back in colors visible to every remaining faction in the villain underworld. The logic is simple. The boy with the sand is the new ceiling. To claim power in the post-All-for-One landscape, you need to demonstrate that you can challenge or surpass the thing that brought the old ceiling down. They come, one after another, in the days and weeks following the meteor. The remnants of the fractured villain coalitions send their strongest, their most dangerous quirk users, their most inventive tacticians, their most suicidally determined soldiers. Each one carries a plan. Each one has studied the footage. Each one believes they have found the gap in the sand's defenses that will let them through. The first carries a quirk that operates on the level of individual particles, a telekinetic ability that can target grains of sand and disrupt their coherent motion. He ambushes Izuku on the training grounds outside UA during an afternoon exercise, dropping from the sky with his quirk already active, pulling at the sand around Izuku's body the way a magnet pulls iron filings. The sand scatters. Grains separate from the mass and hang in the air, disconnected from the beast's signal, like spinning in place under the villain's control. Izuku watches sections of his shield come apart. His turquoise eyes track the disruption pattern, the way it radiates from a central point, the way it loses effectiveness at the periphery of the villain's focus area, the way it requires sustained attention on individual grains to maintain the separation. He compresses. The sand that remains under his control packs tighter. Grain presses against grain until the individual particles are no longer accessible, until the mass has become so dense that there is no space between grains for the telekinetic quirk to target. The separated grains fall, the villain's control over them breaking as Izuku's compression removes the reference pattern his quirk needs to maintain coherence. The fallen grains rejoin the mass at its base. The shield reconstitutes as a layer of sand, so compressed it resembles stone more than earth. The villain fires his quirk again. It hits the compressed surface and finds nothing to separate. It slides off the density the way water slides off glass. His face registers the failure in real time. The widening eyes, the shifting stance, the first backward step of someone who realizes their plan has been bypassed. Izuku moves. Sand coffin. The compressed mass flowing outward from his body in a wave that wraps the villain from feet to chest in under 2 seconds. The density that prevented disruption now becomes the density that prevents escape. The villain thrashes inside the shell, and his telekinetic quirk fires uselessly against material too compressed for him to affect. "You're loud," Izuku says. "Go to sleep." Sand burial. The compression that follows is the kind that ends careers and lives, and the specific ambitions that brought this man to UA's training grounds on A afternoon. The sound carries across the field to where 3 of Izuku's classmates stand watching: Kirishima, Tokoyami, and Uraraka, assigned to the same training period, frozen in their exercise positions with their mouths open and their eyes locked on the aftermath. The second arrives 4 days later, a woman whose quirk can copy and replicate any substance she touches. She contacts Izuku's sand during a transit between campus buildings and begins generating identical material from her palms, streams of false sand that pour from her hands and flood the corridor, mixing with the real sand, creating confusion in the system that relies on every grain responding to a single frequency. The corridor fills with sand, twice the volume it should contain, real and false, intermixed. The beast signals scattered across a mass that contains as much dead material as living. The false sand looks identical. It feels identical. To anyone watching, the corridor has simply been flooded by Izuku's own quirk without his command. Izuku stands in the center of the doubled mass. He closes his eyes. The beast's awareness reaches through the grains, touching each one, feeling for the resonance that separates its own material from the counterfeit. The real sand carries the beast's frequency in its molecular structure, a vibration imprinted by 15 years of constant contact, a signature that copying cannot replicate because it exists below the material level and operates on a connection that has nothing to do with physical composition. He finds his sand the way a parent finds a child's voice in a crowd, by the familiarity of something bone deep, something that copying will never reach. The real sand responds. It moves, it pulls away from the false material and compresses into a sphere around the woman's body, flowing between the identical-looking grains with perfect discrimination, leaving the false sand hanging motionless in the air around them like a frozen ocean, while the real sand takes her completely. Sand coffin. Sand burial. The false sand falls, gravity reclaiming it now that the woman's quirk has ended along with the woman. It hits the corridor floor in a wave that Izuku steps through without breaking stride. The third comes at night, a villain whose quirk generates absolute vacuum in a localized field around her body. She enters Izuku's dormitory room through a window she has neutralized, surrounded by a sphere of complete airlessness that she extends outward as she approaches. Her logic: sand moves through air. Remove the air, remove the medium, stop the sand. It is sound reasoning. It would work against a sand user who moves their sand through conventional space. Izuku's sand does not require air. The moment the vacuum field hits the sand on his floor, the ambient layer that always coats his room's surfaces, the grains stop moving through the air and start moving through the ground. They descend into the floor, through the floor, into the building's structure, into the walls, into the spaces between concrete and rebar that connect every room in the dormitory to every other room. The sand travels underground and through building, approaching the vacuum field from below, from the floor directly beneath the villain's feet, from a direction her quirk does not cover because it projects outward and above rather than downward through solid matter. The sand erupts through the floor, up through the concrete, through the vacuum, that has nothing to affect when the sand arrives already in contact with its target, rather than traveling through air to reach it. The woman is encased before she processes the source of the attack. Her vacuum field persists, holding the air at bay around her body, but the sand is already inside it, already wrapped around her, already compressing in the airless space with the same efficiency it demonstrates everywhere else. Sand coffin. Sand burial. The vacuum collapses with the quirk user's consciousness, and air rushes in to fill the space with a pop that wakes 3 students in adjacent rooms. The 4th and the 5th come together. A duo working in coordination, one with a mass nullification quirk that makes Izuku's sand weightless, and the other with a wind quirk that scatters weightless material across kilometers. Together, they represent a genuine tactical challenge. The sand loses its weight and the wind takes it, and the beast's signal weakens with distance as the grains spread beyond the optimal communication range, Izuku loses 80% of his available sand in the first 10 seconds of the engagement. The grains scatter on the wind, weightless, dispersing into the air above the campus like golden dust motes, spreading in every direction without gravity to hold them together. His gourd empties, his shield thins. For 3 seconds, he stands nearly exposed, the remaining 20% of his sand compressed into a thin armor layer that covers his body in a shell barely thicker than skin. The duo moves to press the advantage. The wind user drives toward Izuku with a blade of compressed air, while the mass nullifier maintains the weightless field to prevent sand recovery. Izuku drops to one knee. He puts his palm on the ground. New sand, converted from the earth beneath the campus. Fresh material that has never been made weightless, and therefore carries its full density, and therefore is immune to the mass nullifier's field until it touches the existing radius. It erupts from the ground inside the radius, coming up from below, inside the field's boundary with weight that the wind quirk struggles to affect because the wind moves air and the sand coming from below is rising through solid earth. Sand coffin. Both of them. Simultaneously. 2 shells of converted earth wrapping 2 villains who thought they had emptied the boy's reserves and discovered that the boy's reserves are not contained in a gourd. They are contained in the ground. In all of it. Everywhere. Sand. Burial. Twice. The sound overlaps. 2 thunderclaps merging into one, more come. Each one different. Each one carrying a specific counter strategy that requires a specific response. Izuku meets them all with the same flat expression and the same even voice and the same final, absolute result. The sand has always been ruthless. The boy has always been ruthless. In Part 2, the two are aligned, and the alignment produces encounters so one-sided that the remaining villain factions eventually stop sending challengers. Class 1A witnesses several of these fights, proximity to Izuku during campus hours making observation inevitable. The reactions accumulate into something larger than individual moments. Kirishima watches the telekinetic get buried, and his respect, already growing since the fist bump, transforms into something approaching devotion. Tokoyami watches the Night Fighter get taken from below, and his professional assessment of Izuku's capabilities undergoes complete revision. Yaoyorozu watches the duo engagement and begins incorporating Izuku's tactical patterns into her own strategic thinking. Ida watches and recalibrates everything he believes about what heroic capability looks like. Todoroki watches all of it with the same steady intensity he has carried since the joint training exercise. He and Izuku exist in a parallel that does not require constant acknowledgement. The parallel of 2 boys built by fathers and choosing, independently, to become something other than what they were designed for. Todoroki has started using his left side. The fire that his father gave him and that he rejected for years now burns in training with full intensity. He credits nothing aloud. But when he catches Izuku's eye across a training ground and Izuku gives the barest nod, a millimeter of acknowledgement from the boy who never acknowledges anything, Todoroki's fire burns a degree hotter. Bakugo watches. He watches from the edge of every fight. He watches from across training grounds and dormitory common rooms and the classroom where he still sits in the front row and Izuku still sits in the back corner, and the distance between them carries the weight of everything Bakugo screamed in the arena and everything that happened after. He watches Izuku eliminate a top-tier villain, the vacuum user, the one who came at night, the one whose strategy was sound and whose execution was professional, and who lasted approximately 15 seconds against a boy who was half asleep when the fight started. Bakugo watches it through the common room window, and his face carries an expression that his classmates have never seen on him. It lives somewhere between fury and something older. Something that might be the early stages of understanding. 3 days after the vacuum fight, Bakugo finds Izuku on the dormitory roof. The afternoon light is golden. Izuku sits at the roof's edge with his gourd beside him, his eyes on the skyline. The sand does not spine up when Bakugo approaches, which means Izuku has registered his presence and allowed the approach, which means this conversation is permitted. Bakugo stands 3 meters away. His hands are in his pockets. His jaw works. The words he wants to say are fighting him, fighting his pride, his identity, his decade-long certainty that he is the strongest thing in any room. What comes out when it finally comes is stripped of volume. It is Bakugo's voice at its lowest register, the one reserved for things that cost more than explosions. "You weren't nothing," Bakugo says, in the arena. "When I said that, you weren't." He does not say, "I'm sorry." That is not a word in Bakugo's vocabulary, and forcing it would make it false. What he says instead, the simple correction of his own statement, the admission that the words he used as weapons in the sports festival arena were wrong, costs him more than any apology could. It costs him the version of himself that needed Izuku to be nothing in order for Bakugo to be everything. Izuku does not turn around. His turquoise eyes stay on the skyline. The gourd breathes beside him in the slow rhythm of the beast at rest. "I know," Izuku says. 2 words. Flat and final and carrying no resentment and no warmth and no particular weight. And that somehow is exactly right. Because what Izuku is saying is, your assessment of me never mattered. What I am was never contingent on what you called me. I know what I am, and what I am has nothing to do with your vocabulary. Bakugo stands on the roof for another 30 seconds. Then he turns and walks back to the access door and goes inside and says nothing to anyone for the rest of the evening. But something has shifted. A tectonic plate in the geography of Bakugo's internal landscape has moved 1 degree in a new direction, and the shift, invisible from outside, enormous from within, will continue for years. It started with watching a boy he called nothing save a city from the sky. The sand in the city takes weeks to clear. Every gutter, every window ledge, every rooftop and sidewalk and parked car in Musutafu carries the evidence of the day the ground stood up. Cleanup crews work through it in shifts. Citizens sweep their doorsteps and shake sand from their laundry and find it in their shoes and between their floorboards. It is everywhere. It is a reminder written across every surface that people touch in their daily lives. And people talk about it differently than they talk about other hero events. There is no fear in the conversation. When people speak about the sand that fell from the sky, they speak about it the way people speak about weather that could have been deadly and wasn't. With relief, with gratitude, with the quiet acknowledgement that something protected them. The word that circulates most often in the civilian conversations about Midoriya Izuku is not dangerous and not terrifying and not weapon. The word is strong, said with admiration rather than fear. Said the way people describe the walls of their homes or the levees that hold back rivers, structures that exist to protect. And that proved it when the test arrived. The Hero Commission holds its formal session on a Thursday morning 3 weeks after the meteor. The room is a government conference facility. Large table, leather chairs, the specific sterile gravity of spaces where decisions about other people's lives get made by people in suits. Representatives from the Commission's restructured leadership, senior pro-heroes, government liaisons, UA faculty, all present, all positioned around the table with documentation in front of them that describes the events of the past 2 months in official language. Izuku's file sits at the center of the table. It has grown considerably since the sparse, classified document Nezu received before the entrance exam. It now contains incident reports from the USJ, from the sports festival, from the retrieval team engagement, from the joint training exercise, from the Shigaraki encounter, from the all-for-one confrontation, details redacted for national security, but the outcome confirmed, from the meteor event. Each report tells the same story from a different angle. Each one describes a quirk that has no precedent and a person who has grown into it with the same inevitability as water filling a vessel. Hisashi Midoriya's file also sits on the table. This file, produced by Nezu's intelligence network, cross-referenced with records that All for One's death released from classified status, contains everything. The financial dealings, the commission connections, the containment orders, the handler protocols. The night Chiyo Narazaki was sent into a 6-year-old's room with a blade. Everything Hisashi did is documented, verified, entered into the official record in language that removes any possibility of rehabilitation or reinterpretation. The chairman of the restructured commission opens the session. His name does not matter. His face does not matter. He is a vessel for the institutional voice that says, We are here to determine the status classification of student Midoriya Izuku, currently enrolled in UA High School's Hero course. Izuku is present. He sits at the table with his gourd leaning against his chair and his arms crossed and his turquoise eyes moving between faces, with the slow, patient attention of someone who has already decided the outcome and is waiting for the room to arrive at it on its own schedule. The sand in the gourd is absolutely still, the stillness of rest rather than tension, the stillness of the beast in full alignment with its host, the stillness of a weapon that knows it will not need to deploy. The commission representatives speak. They reference protocols. They cite classification frameworks. They use phrases like national security consideration and quirk risk assessment and provisional containment pending evaluation. The institutional vocabulary of people trying to apply standard systems to something that has exceeded every standard the system was built to measure. Then, All Might speaks. He rises from his seat at the table, his civilian form thin and angular, the diminished body that carries the same spirit that walked through a sandstorm with blood on his shoulders and his arms open. His blue eyes carry the weight of 30 years of heroism and the specific weight of a promise made to a boy in a stadium. His voice fills the room the way his presence fills it, with authority earned by a lifetime of choosing to save. I will be brief, All Might says. This child stopped a meteor from ending this city. He eliminated two of the most dangerous villains in the country's history while operating without institutional support and without authorization, because the institutions that should have supported him were too slow and the authorization systems that should have protected him were being used against him by his own father. His eyes move across the faces at the table. The documentation in front of you describes a child who was weaponized from birth, contained for a decade, and subjected to conditions that this commission, in its previous form, enabled through inaction and complicity. The room is completely still. All Might continues. Midoriya Izuku is a student at UA High School. He is 15 years old. He has done more to protect the citizens of this country in 2 months than most pro-heroes accomplish in careers. If this body intends to reclassify him as a state asset or restrict his enrollment or apply any form of containment to a child who has already survived 9 years of it, then this body will need to explain that decision to the people of this city, who are still sweeping his sand off their doorsteps, because he put it there while saving their lives. He sits down. The room processes his words. The commission representatives exchange looks that carry the specific weight of people realizing they are on the wrong side of something obvious. The chairman clears his throat. The documents shuffle. The language shifts. The commission grants Midoriya Izuku full UA enrollment with independent student status, meaning no outside body has authority over his training schedule or quirk usage outside of UA's internal protocols. They grant a provisional hero license, the youngest in recorded history, that classifies his abilities under a new designation created for the occasion. The classification reads Sand Manipulation Autonomous Defense Scale Unrated. The word unrated carries a footnote that says, current assessment frameworks insufficient for classification. Izuku listens to the outcome without expression. His turquoise eyes rest on the chairman's face as the words are spoken. He does not smile. He does not nod. He receives the institutional acknowledgement the way the desert receives rain, without reaction, without gratitude, without any indication that the reception has changed the fundamental nature of what exists there. When the session concludes, Izuku stands. He takes the gourd. He walks to the door. The representatives and heroes and faculty watch him leave with the specific silence of people who have just formally acknowledged something they always knew was larger than their frameworks could contain. In the hallway outside the conference room, All Might falls into step beside him. They walk together, the thin man and the boy with the gourd, down a government corridor that leads to an exit, that leads to a sidewalk, that leads to an afternoon. They step outside. The air is warm, the sidewalk is clean, or mostly clean, with a thin residue of gold-brown sand still visible in the cracks between the pavement tiles, the last traces of the meteor event that the cleanup crews will eventually reach but have not reached yet. All Might matches Izuku's pace. They walk in the kind of silence that exists between people who have established trust through actions rather than words, and therefore do not need words to maintain it. A block passes. 2. The city moves around them. Traffic, pedestrians, the ordinary sounds of a world that continues because a boy with a gourd decided it would. All Might speaks. His voice carries the warmth of the afternoon and the ease of someone who has found something worth being present for. What comes next, he asks. The question is simple. It carries no agenda. It is a man asking a boy what he wants, a question that nobody asked Izuku for the first 15 years of his life. Izuku walks. His gourd shifts on his back. The sand inside it rolls once, a single movement like something settling into place. The kanji on his forehead catches the afternoon light. Love, written in blood and sand by a child who believed it was the only kind he would ever receive. He thinks about the word. He thinks about what it meant when he carved it, and what it means now, after All Might's arms. All Might's arms, after 2 years of Uraraka's consistency, after the fist bump and the roof conversation, and the day the city looked up and saw his sand between them and the thing that would have ended them. He thinks about the beast in his skull, and the way it has learned to be still, and the way its stillness feels like something he can build on rather than something he must endure. He thinks about the people who stood beside him. Uraraka, who sat at his empty table every day until the table was not empty anymore. All Might, who walked through a sandstorm to hold a crying boy. Kirishima, who extended a fist without flinching. Todoroki, who saw a parallel and chose to stand in proximity to it. Even Bakugo, who called him nothing and then corrected himself, and the correction cost more than the insult ever did. Everyone who has stood beside him has given him strength. The thought arrives with the weight of something true. True in the way the sand is true, in the way the beast is true, in the way the kanji on his forehead is true. It is true because it was earned. Every piece of it was fought for and proven and bought with the currency of showing up and staying and choosing to remain, even when the sand raised its spines and the boy refused to look and the world said this one is unreachable. They reached him. They reached him anyway, and the reaching made him stronger than the weapon ever was. Izuku stops walking. He stands on a sidewalk in the afternoon light with his gourd on his back and his eyes forward, and the beast settled in his skull like something that has finally found a home that is choosing to keep it. What comes next? Izuku says. His voice is his own, the rasp still there, the hoarseness of a decade of sleeplessness permanently embedded in the vocal cords, but carrying something new beneath the roughness. Certainty. The certainty of a person who has decided and whose decisions have the weight of continents behind them. Is that I choose. He looks at All Might. The turquoise eyes hold the man's gaze with the same intensity they held his father's, but the intent behind them is different. Where Hisashi received the flat stare of something final arriving, All Might receives something warmer, something that does not have a name in Izuku's vocabulary yet, but is working toward one. I choose to be here, Izuku says. I choose to protect this place. I choose the people who chose me. He starts walking again. All Might matches his pace. The afternoon moves around them. And I choose myself, Izuku says. The last sentence. The one that closes the circle that opened on a night when a 6-year-old boy carved love into his own face because there was nobody else to do it. I choose to be mine. That has always been the point. The sand in the gourd settles, every grain at rest. The beast hums its agreement, low, satisfied, carried on the frequency of 15 years of partnership that has at last found equilibrium. The afternoon light falls across the sidewalk in patterns that catch the residual sand in the cracks and turn it gold. Izuku Midoriya walks into his future carrying a desert on his back and a choice in his chest and the name of love written on his forehead in the only handwriting that ever mattered, his own. The city sweeps the sand from its gutters in the weeks that follow. It takes workers and machinery and the slow, patient work of returning a metropolis to its pre-sand state. They find it everywhere. In the storm drains and the ventilation systems and the cracks between bricks and the soil of every park and garden in every district. Some residents stop sweeping. Some of them leave the sand where it fell, on window ledges, in small accumulations at the bases of walls, in the corners of doorways where it settled during the gentle rain that followed the meteor's death. They leave it the way people leave marks of something they want to remember. A thin layer of gold-brown earth that says, something protected us here. Something chose to keep this city standing. Izuku attends classes. He sits in his corner. The gourd leans against the wall beside him. The distance around him exists still, a radius of space that his presence naturally generates, but the quality of it has transformed once more. It is the distance of respect rather than fear, the distance of recognition rather than avoidance. The students of Class 1A orbit their classmate with the same gravitational relationship that smaller bodies hold with larger ones. Drawn by the mass of what he is, kept at a distance that feels correct rather than imposed. Uraraka still sits at his table at lunch. She still greets him in the hallways. She still asks questions she knows he may or may not answer, but the dynamic has shifted. Where before she was speaking to a wall that occasionally registered her existence, she is now speaking to a person who occasionally, with increasing frequency, responds. Short answers. Monosyllables that carry more weight than other people's paragraphs. And sometimes, rarely, but with a consistency that Uraraka tracks like a cartographer mapping new territory, he initiates a word, a glance, a moment where his head turns toward her before she has spoken, as if the sand told him she was approaching and he decided to be ready for it, on a rooftop, an evening. The city spread below them, the last traces of sand still visible in the gutters if you know where to look. Uraraka sits next to Izuku at the roof's edge, the distance between them reduced from 3 feet to 2 over the course of months of consistent presence. She is talking about something, about her family, about the agency she wants to build, about the future she is working toward. Her voice carries the warmth she has always carried, and the gourd sits between them like a third presence. And the sand inside it does not stir. Izuku looks at her. He looks at her the way he looked at All Might in the medical wing, with the recognition of something received that he never expected and still does not know how to name. The turquoise of his eyes meets the brown of hers, and the contact holds for 3 seconds, 4, 5. You stayed too, he says. Uraraka's heart does the thing it has been doing since the first time his sand stayed flat when she spoke. Her eyes are bright. Her smile is the same one she gave him on day 1. Unchanged, unconditioned, offered without expectation of return. Always, she says. Izuku looks away. He looks at the city. The kanji on his forehead catches the fading light. His face carries the faintest trace of something that might be the early architecture of a smile if given enough time and enough consistent warmth to finish building itself. Some things are still in progress. Some things deserve the time it takes to arrive. The evening settles. The city hums. The sand rests in the gourd with the patience of something that has found its purpose and is content to carry it. Izuku Midoriya sits on a rooftop with a girl who chose him beside him and a city he chose to protect below him, and the beast humming its low, satisfied note in the basement of his skull. The note of something that spent 15 years screaming for blood and has found, at last, that there are other things worth screaming for. He is what he declared himself on a night when blood and sand met skin and carved a word that meant everything and nothing at the same time. He is loved by the people who chose him, by the city that wears his sand in its cracks, by the girl who kept showing up, by the man who walked through a storm, by a beast that has been with him since before birth and will be with him until after everything else ends. And he is loved by himself. That was always the point. That was what the kanji said when a 6-year-old boy wrote it in his own blood on his own face in a room with no windows and a body on the floor. The word was a declaration before it was a hope. It was a fact before it was a prayer. It was the one thing that nobody could take from him because he put it there with his own hand, love, written by the only person whose permission mattered, carried by the only person whose strength was never in question. Izuku Midoriya, 15 years old, a desert on his back, a city in his hands, a future that belongs to him because he killed every alternative and stood in the aftermath and chose. The sand settles. The story ends where it began, with a boy who carries something impossible and walks forward anyway. The difference between the beginning and the end is everything in between. The difference is All Might's arms and Uraraka's consistency and Todoroki's parallel and Bakugo's correction and a city covered in gold-brown earth because the boy decided it would live. The difference is a beast that learned to be still and a boy who learned to be held and a father buried in the sand he tried to build into a weapon. The difference is that the word on Izuku's forehead, the one he wrote in blood and sand on the worst night of his life, finally means what it was always supposed to mean. Chosen, earned, kept his.
The hero roster. A massive salute to the legends backing this journey. Your support is what keeps the momentum at an all-time high and the dream moving forward. You guys are the absolute best. Pro heroes. The elite front line, stepping up and setting the pace for the whole community. DA, Fire 05.
Symbol of peace. The pillars of the community, the titans who keep our foundations solid and the hype at an all-time high. Aries Bryant, Jonah Wheeler, T-Mac, XXHJRI3AS7X. Wolf, Hyper Beams, Michael Murphy, Grand Region Kell, Sin Hunter, Deshaun Jones, Logan Bland, Alexander Johannes, Alex Morgan, Ray Various, Blaze, That Other Guy Too, Chad Reynolds, Zachariah Allison, T. Mackey 68 Rimuru, Nuh-uh, Kelvin Bowman, AZ Othros, Dweller of the Deepest Depths, Lone Wolf, The Lone One, Jacob Rops, Bully Maguire Shadow, Ameri B, Neostar Productions, Aciel Cardenas, Shaquan Simmons, Thunder, Elijah Saunders, Peter Hamilton, Freddie Rose, Omega, Akuma no Akami, Chris Talley, Remorsefuls, Black Vein, Joshua Hedrington, Aaron Abercrombie, Drift SK8er, Akeno Himejima, Corey Tokars, Kwan Yen Thompson, Yan, Devin Black, Crow, Dasher Games, Joe Bros, Rai Von Crimson River, Dante Alistor, Adam Yonkers, Blood Saints, Donna Cafe, Zeph, Howie 60, Ignacio, Carlos Terry. Hope of the universe, the ultimate guardians, celestial tier supporters whose impact literally shines across the galaxy. Voidwrought, Chaos Umbre, Noroi Uzumaki Uchiha, Keishon, Tayshawn Palmer, Coldbane 4, The Maniac 563, Debs, LS Morningstar, Marl, Spintown, Ike's Shoot 50, Greg Green, James, Juan, Zeno KJ. If you want more savage, no-filter breakdowns of Izuku turning the MHA world into his personal sand graveyard, smash like, subscribe, and ring the bell. The sand is watching, and it's always hungry. See you in the next burial, degenerates.